YouTube and Facebook and Twitch. So we should be up and running. I think we're live now. Welcome in, friends. Welcome in. Been one heck of a day of live streaming. We started out with the Unapologetic show, and then Myth Vision, and then AXP, and now we're here for a short stream. I can't stay late tonight because I've got to wake up at like 4:30 in the morning tomorrow to catch an early flight. But anyways, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. I wanted, because it was a short live, I wanted to do something a little bit different. So kind of an experimental live. We're going to see what happens with the experimental live stream. But if you're watching on YouTube or Facebook or Twitch, there's a link in the description where you can join the live stream. You can be a part of the live stream. If you're on TikTok, you already know how to join the live stream. It's not hard at all. You just got to hit that guest request button. We're doing something a little bit different tonight, and I'm asking questions to Christians. This is going to be the Christ quiz night. You don't have to compete with me. You don't have to answer questions and compete with me. I just have some questions that I think are worth asking, and I want to see if Christians can answer any of my questions. And FTAZ, welcome to the Kraken Crew Elite. Big W, you've got access to the Deconstruction cheat sheet. And same with Daniel. Thank you so much for being a member at the Kraken Crew Elite. Everybody in the Elite has access to the cheat sheet, as does all the subscribers on the stream from TikTok, everyone who's a subscriber on TikTok. So big W. Definitely appreciate everyone who's a member and a subscriber. Helps the channel stay afloat. I really appreciate that. And we surpassed our goal of 1,100. Our next goal is going to be 1,200 members. So big W for the Deconstruction crew coming through on that goal. Big thank you. And we've got a super chat from Jay Corling. Good to see you tonight, Jay. Jay says, so this means some fast food cooking. I think that's what it means, actually. Yeah, I think you pretty much nailed it. Yep. There's going to be a fast session. We're only going to be here for probably 2 hours. We'll see what happens. Let me open up the guest box before I forget on TikTok. Oh, I didn't miss anybody. There's no guest in there. Okay, so here's what we're doing. We've got the screen. The stream is open. And I'm just asking any believers, any Christians that want to join, come up. I've got a couple questions. And by a couple, I mean, I don't know. I prepared, about 45 or 50 different questions to ask. I've got some questions that I think deserve a little bit of dialogue and maybe some answers. I'm curious to know. So we're doing the Christ quiz tonight. Christians, can you answer my questions? Inquiring minds would like to know. I just got questions. I'm not out here demanding that no God exists, and I'm not here to tell you that your religion is stupid. I just got some questions. And the Hound, thank you so much for the super chat, Hound. Hound says, do you have to be Christian to go up? Well, that is kind of the point. The tonight's stream is questions that I have for Christians specifically. So in order for the setup to work, yeah, unfortunately, you kind of do have to be a Christian. So if you're watching this on TikTok and you're like, hey, I'm a Christian, I don't mind some questions. Let's get into the guest box. Well, down at the bottom of the screen, you can hit that guest request and you can be up here and, participating in a little bit of dialogue. It should be a lot of fun. And my conscious a member for 3 months in the Kraken Crew Elite says, just saying hi to you and everyone else. Hope everyone is doing well and staying safe. Much love to you all. Well, thank you so much, my conscience. Definitely appreciate that. And thank you for supporting the channel. Big W for supporting the channel. And also Carlos, another member. Carlos, thank you for the message. Says, ready, steady, Duggo. We're going to be doing some Duggan tonight. We're going to be teaching some people how to Dougie. That's the goal. Hopefully we can get some brave Christians to come up and answer some questions and engage in a little bit of dialogue. I'm curious to know. I've got a bunch of goodies on the list, by the way. I've got all kinds of goodies on the list of questions. This coming week should be really interesting. So I'm actually going to be on the road this week from work, or for work, not from work. So I'm going to be live streaming on my laptop this week. So I don't know if I'll be able to live stream to TikTok and to YouTube because my computer is a Mac. My laptop's a Mac, and TikTok Studio doesn't work on Mac yet. So I don't really have a good method of streaming to TikTok in a way that I can take guests. But I did find a way that I can stream the live stream to TikTok using my Mac. I just can't take guests. That's my holdup. I can't take guests on TikTok yet. So come Wednesday night or whenever I get to stream during this week, I'll be able to stream to YouTube and TikTok, but I'll have to take all my guests on the YouTube queue. Now, if you're watching on YouTube right now and you're thinking, I'd like to get in and answer a few questions, it sounds like fun, maybe a little bit of trivia, there's a link in the description of the video, and it's also on the screen. It's tinyurl.com/dzguest. Click that link and you'll be directed into the guest room, and I can get you on the stage. We got a message from Chip. Chip, a 2-month member, Big W Chip, says, been catching up on your AXP episodes. Good stuff. Well, Chip, thank you so much for watching the AXP stream. I have a really good time debating with the people over at AXP, and anyone who's following me, but they're not also following the Atheist Experience or the ACA, I encourage you to do so. The ACA actually had a big role to play in me moving from like agnostic belief in a God into atheism. It had a really big impact. So big W to the ACA and to the Atheist Experience, because like it's one of the reasons why I'm here right now doing what I do. Jake says, on TikTok, we have to clear the display to see the link. Just to let you know, Justin. Yeah, I know on TikTok you can't see this. So the way TikTok is, you guys can't actually see this link on the screen, and it's okay because on TikTok you can just hit the guest request. Like you don't need this link to join. You don't need it. It's not important for you. This link's actually only important for people watching on Facebook and YouTube and Twitch and whatnot. This is for everybody else. If you're watching on TikTok, you just have to hit that guest request down at the bottom. So go ahead and hit that guest request. You'll be put into the queue. And Smokelahoma, again, I love this name. Thank you for the super chat. Big W on the 420 says, here for the show, fresh pretzels and cheese dip ready. Actually, this is the way I structured this particular show is going to be full of pretzeling. This topic, this show that I've structured is hopefully going to be very similar to the God is not good topic, where there's a lot of pretzeling to defend some of the passages of the Bible. So it should be fun. We just got to get some courageous Christians prepared to get into the box and answer a little bit of questions. And Benjamin, thank you so much for the $2 super chat. It says, set up VM on your Mac with an OS that supports TikTok. So I do have a VM on my Mac, and I've got a copy of Windows installed on it. The problem is, in order for it to work, to stream to TikTok and to YouTube at the same time, I have to use the VMware. I have to use it for Streamlabs and for TikTok, because I have to be able to connect all of the various screens and all of the audio to make the connections as well, right? So the problem with that is, most virtual machines, even though they're pretty robust, I don't know if they're robust enough to handle dual streaming on 2 different platforms at the same time. I'm doing it right now on a computer that I specially built with my own 2 hands, using carefully constructed parts that were on the higher end of the spectrum in order to get it to work out. So I don't know if like my laptop running a VM is necessarily going to be powerful enough to make it happen. But Benjamin, you're right. I could do it from a VM, and I've already set up a VM that can do exactly what you're proposing. The question is whether or not I've got enough processing power to actually make it work. We'll find out. We will find out. We'll see what happens. But appreciate the thought. It's a really good thought. But I'm with you. All right. So let me get our first guest in here. Thank you for the hat, Bad Religion. I appreciate that. And we've got Susan with us now. How you doing, Susan?
Hi, how are you doing, Justin?
Doing very good. Thank you.
Yeah, just a quick question. Thank you so much. Just a quick question about the VM. You mean the virtual machine, right? On Mac, what difference does it make if I install it on my Mac, iMac or PC, like for TikTok?
So the problem I have with virtual machines is, so I'm using VMware Fusion. I could use Parallels Desktop, and that's a pretty powerful tool. But you know, the problem that I have with VMware and with most virtual machines is that it's actually a little bit difficult to do a lot of heavy lifting because it bogs down. So the amount of power to run just Streamlabs and TikTok Studio is pretty in depth. But then to take those two programs, throw them into a virtual machine, and then run the virtual machine and those applications inside of the virtual machine, that is actually a really difficult task because I'm basically asking it to do double duty at that point.
Will it be lighter, though, to run those kind of applications on a virtual machine?
I don't think it would be lighter. So I tested it without it live. I ran both Streamlabs and TikTok Studio on my virtual machine with as much resources as I had available. And even not being live, not even being connected, it was having a little bit of trouble keeping up. Like my animated backgrounds were like glitching. They were lagging.
Yeah. I think it's good. I can see it very well. It's pretty, like the contrast is very, very, very good. Yeah.
Well, I'm not on the laptop right now. I'm on my main PC.
On your main PC. Okay, I see. Okay, Justin, I don't want to take much of your time. Just a quick question, if you don't mind me asking you as an atheist. I've always wanted to ask this question. Well, I am a theist. I believe there is a superpower that I like to call God. And I'm not going to go through like religions and scriptures and stuff like that, but I need to know your position or answer at least to one of the questions that I have in mind, like the matter. Where did it come from? For us, we believe that, in this superpower. We believe that God created matter itself, and from this matter, all stars and planets and galaxies have been created. So I can call myself a creator when I build a computer or a PCB or stuff like that, but I still need something to use to build this computer, like the components and capacitors, resistors, etc., etc. And but God did not need any of those. So he created matter in the very beginning. Before, like from this matter, we came from this matter. Galaxies and planets and sun and moon and etc., etc. came from this matter. So this is my question to you as an atheist. I think you believe that time is eternal. I'm not gonna argue with that. Yeah, I know why you think this way, but time and matter, like let's talk for like a couple of minutes, if you don't mind. Where did matter come from? Do we know, we the humans, do we know where matter came from? For me to believe there is no superpower that's called God. If I can justify matter and know where this matter came from, then at least I can say, yes, there is no superpower that I can call God. But as long as I don't have an answer to that, I cannot believe there is no God. You know what? I hope you understood my question, Justin.
I understand your question, and I think I would say two things. The first thing is that I don't think it came from anywhere. I think all the matter, space, and time, all the stuff that makes up our universe, I think that it's just always existed. I don't think there was ever a time in which there was nothing. And I don't see a reason to believe that there was ever nothing. I see no evidence of a nothingness. But the other thing I would say is that like you're basically suggesting that like the only alternative has to be like because you can't explain time or you can't explain matter, that means it must be from God. But I think that's like a non sequitur. I think there's lots of other explanations that don't involve a God. And I think essentially the other problem is that like you're not applying the same level of criticism to God, right? You're just like saying, okay, well, if I can't explain it without a God, then it must be a God. But like, how do we explain God? We don't have, we don't have an explanation for God. The same problem that you have with matter, you also have with God.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, so yeah, so you are applying the same rule on me being someone who believes there is a superpower called God, like being a person who is unable to justify or know what matter or where this matter came from. Is this what you mean?
What I'm saying is that the amount of skeptical thinking that you're applying to matter, you're not applying to God. But I think you should. Like if you're saying,
Oh.
like we need a justification for matter, then we should also need a justification for God. And if you're saying, well, we don't have a justification for God, it just seems to be necessary because we don't have another explainer. Well, I could say, okay, well, if we can just appeal to something that we have no evidence of, that it doesn't need any justification, then I can appeal to anything. I could just say, okay, well, there's a naturalistic cause, and I'm going to call it the bloop de bloop. And the thing that the bloop de bloop does is it creates something from nothing. That's all it does. It's not sentient. It's not a god. It's just a bloop de bloop. And the bloop de bloop creates something from nothing and gave us everything that we have today. And it has far less assumptions. And I can do that using the same logic that you laid out for God.
Okay, so as of now, we the humans do not know where matter came from. Like,
Well, I don't think it came from anywhere. I think it always existed.
so it's eternal, like time. Time
Yeah.
and matter both are eternal.
Yeah, well, like what would be like the evidence that there was once nothing? Why would I think that?
Okay, okay, I understand your point. Okay, and scientifically, nothing has been proven in this regards, like when it comes to matter, like scientifically or mathematically. Like we know mathematically that the universe is expanding. Scientists have been able to, I think, prove mathematically that the universe is expanding. So, from science point of view, has there been any theory about matter? Whatever, any kind of theory.
I'm not sure I understand the question, but there's lots of theories on how matter came into its current form. So like there's the cosmic foam or the quantum foam theory. There's various editions of the what's the word I'm looking for? William Kinney talks about inflation theory. So inflation theory has some answers, or there's like the elastic universe theory or the Big Crunch theory, which is what I hold to, which just stipulates that like time, space, and matter always existed. Like there's a couple ways you can attack it, but the reality of it is like when you posit a God, I just don't see a reason for the God. I don't like. There's so many simpler explanations.
I see. Okay, I understand now. Okay, thank you so much, Justin, for your time. You have a nice weekend. Thank you so much.
Good to hear
Have
from
a
you,
great
Susan.
day.
Have a great one.
Yeah, thank you. You too. Bye-bye.
I think Susan and I have talked before, and she was nice and polite last time. All right, we're going to get Vor in here in just a second. Let me grab these super chats. Fierce Interaction, Big W, thank you so much for the $20 super chat. It says, been catching up on the lives. I've been missing. Some of those were wild. I know. You got to see the Hadassah replay, by the way. It says, when are you going to let... Oh, here you go. When are you going to let Hadassah co-host? I love the simple conversations, but not gonna lie, I love to see some crashes tonight. Nice to see you on AXP too. Well, thank you so much, Fierce. And I gotta be honest, like I shouldn't find it so entertaining, but the crash outs are a little bit entertaining. They just kind of are. I shouldn't feel that way. Like I feel guilty because I feel that way, but it's kind of entertaining to watch toxic people crash out. But thank you so much for supporting the channel, Fierce. And Evan, good to see you too, friend. Thank you so much for support, and thank you for the super chat. It says, what would Jesus post if he had OnlyFans? Watch me get nailed. Dude, if Jesus had an OnlyFans, it would be the craziest level of kink possible. And that guy was a sadomasochist. That's all there is to it. And Aaron, thank you so much for the super chat. Good to see you, fellow dragon. He says, from Matthew 5, what did the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees look like, since he says you can't go to heaven without it? So this is a good question. And most people that are of the Messianic Jewish persuasion, I agree with, where they're suggesting that righteousness includes the doing of the law, right? When Jesus says you have to teach people to do the law. You shouldn't teach people not to do the law. When he says that not a jot or a tittle will pass away from the law. And then he says your righteousness must exceed that of the Pharisees. What he's saying is you have to actually take these laws seriously and obey them. That's my reading of it. I'm reading Jesus as a Judaizer in Matthew chapter 5, verse 20, when he says exactly what you're talking about, Aaron. So I think you're probably seeing the same thing I'm seeing. And CC Car, thank you so much for the super chat. It says, super cool watching you with Derek today. Well, thank you so much, CC Car. I appreciate it. And Derek's a lot of fun. I really like Derek. I love Myth Vision. I've been watching it for quite some time. Excellent channel. I've been watching Myth Vision since he was interviewing or doing his shows with Bob Price. That's how long I've been watching Myth Vision. So it's been a while. So it's kind of fun that I actually get to talk to him on screen now. And last one, Ligma. Thank you so much for the $10 super chat, Ligma. Thank you for supporting and being part of the stream as always. It says, Jews seem to interpret my Lord in Psalm 110:1 as being a future Messiah or a king, but it seems to be referring to David himself being spoken about by a third party. Am I way off? You're 100% correct. It seems to be a messianic or a Davidic prophecy about King David specifically. Some people have tried to make it about a different king, like a messianic king. But no matter what you make it about, it is a prophecy about an actual physical king where his enemies are placed below his feet. What it's not about is about two different gods. It's not a Trinitarian text. But it's a good question, Ligma, and I think you're 100% right. It's a prophecy about the king. Parker, thank you for the campfire. I appreciate that. And with that, we've got our friend Vor coming in. We'll see if Vor can connect. There we go. We got him. How you doing, Vor?
Hey, Justin. Thanks for having me on.
Well, it's good to have you back, Vor. This is a little bit different from the last quiz that you participated in. These are, I would say, toilet like shower thoughts.
Which one? Very important. Is it toilet or shower?
Well, for me, they're the same because I use the bathroom right before I shower. Never use the bathroom after you shower. You got to take another shower.
Can't go reverse order for sure.
Yeah. So my thinking starts when I sit. Anyways, so a lot of these are questions that I think are just, we're going to call them quandaries. I mean, I'm
nervous.
Some of them are difficult too. I mean, some of them are kind of, they're like debate questions. They're debate starters, but some of them are just like, hey, what the heck's going on here? Okay, so first question, okay. Refresh my memory. Do you believe in hellfire?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a hopeful nihilist, but I think it's possible.
Yeah, I mean, you hold to annihilation, right?
That's my hope, yeah.
Okay, perfect. So my first question is, how does hellfire like annihilate or harm anything pertaining to the human body? Because theoretically, our human body is in the ground. It's the soul that goes into hell, right?
Yeah, that would be the idea. And that's where, so it's a weeping, gnashing of teeth. It talks about Gadara or whatever. That was like a burn pile. I personally am hoping that it's intentional decision to be separated from God, and that would be anguish. You're in anguish because you're separated from the presence of God. So that's my hope. But yeah, physical fire shouldn't burn a spirit.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't see how physical fire could burn a spirit, but it seems to be that way, right? Because when the rich man, Lazarus, goes down and he's in the fire, he seems to be like overheating, right?
And torment, yeah.
Right, but was it?
Do you think that
body?
was? So, do you think that was a metaphor? I mean, this is a discussion that people have, obviously, in Christian circles. Was that a metaphor or was that a factual event? What do you think?
Well, personally, I think it's a metaphor.
Okay.
Like I don't,
because there's an interesting. Sorry, an interesting argument that he was actually talking about the Lazarus that died and he resurrected. And that it was like, because when Jesus says this, he was like, there was a man. So if it was a physical thing, obviously this Lazarus was bummed, but he was hot, he was thirsty. It doesn't necessarily say he was burning though.
Yeah. So whether or not it's true or a metaphor, Eric, thank you for the DJ glasses. Whether or not it's like a true history or a metaphor, I think we can make the same conclusions from the story, right?
The conclusion would be, Yeah, it's you don't want to be where Lazarus was.
Yeah, exactly. That's the conclusion. You don't want to be here. It sucks here, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and the thing that sucks there, part of the thing that sucks is that like it's hot, it's unpleasant. Like I need water for
And
my
there's
tongue.
nothing to drink.
Right?
And there's nothing to drink, which
Yeah.
would suck. Yeah.
Yeah. So like, but if that's the case, right? Could we conclude that Lazarus must have been there in bodily form?
Yeah, so I'm torn. I don't want to give like a middling answer. I apologize, but I think it could be a metaphor in, Jesus obviously making the bigger point that living your life materialistically for riches ends up in a bad reward, because I think that's a pretty common theme with Jesus, like forsaking material things for kingdom. So it can just be that Jesus is saying that if you live your life kind of being an asshole and trying to get and not caring about how you affect others, you're in a far worse place than is, the rich man. Lazarus was the guy who was actually in a good position. Lazarus, who was poor and miserable, he had the reward. So I think that's the bigger picture, but it doesn't sound like, in answer to the question, it doesn't sound like the rich man, I apologize for getting those confused, it was actually burning. He was just miserable. So that could be, again, being separated from God, being a miserable state.
Sure. So you're taking like the unpleasant heat that he's experiencing. That's a metaphor. That's not real.
Just general discomfort, just a place you don't want to be, and Jesus warning against going there, as opposed to actually physiologically being consumed by fire. So I think it's just a miserable place. And I wonder if that guy would have repented and said, Jesus, help me, or I'm sorry, as opposed to, just go save my brothers or whatever. He seemed to miss the plot. He didn't repent. I wonder if he would have repented if he would have had a different outcome.
So, I mean, that's a fair point. There's been a lot of theologians over the years that have wondered if there's an opportunity to repent after you're dead. I think there's some wiggle room there. I think there's a lot of difficulty too, because it seems to suggest that like it's too late for that. But I don't really, to be honest, I don't know if I would like plant my flag there. Like, if I was a theologian, I don't know if I would plant my flag on the idea that once you're dead, that's your last shot. That's entirely, it's over. You're doomed. You know?
And that's what's hard for me, because I believe that hell and this idea of being separated from God is more of a threat than actually, a loving God wanting us to all burn, or wanting all the bad people to burn or whatever. But when I was younger, I met a man who, I was about 7 years old. He came to our house and he was physically burned, like Freddy Krueger level. And I remember that his thumbs were actually his big toes, because what had happened, he was a Hell's Angel motorcycle rider, and he crashed, and him and his girlfriend died, and he went to hell, and he was in hell, and he was miserable. It's very similar to what this guy, the rich man's, experiencing. And he saw a light out in the distance, and he's like, oh, is that Jesus? And he's in his mind, he's going, I didn't believe any of this. None of this is true. And he didn't have a mouth, or he couldn't speak, but he cried out to Jesus, and he came and he pulled him out of hell, put him back in his body. He was so badly damaged and so burned that they ended up using his big toes for his thumbs, whatever weird 1983 tech that was. But that was obviously a very scarring event for me as a 7-year-old, seeing a man burned that bad, telling that story. But in that case, he was in hell and cried out to Jesus and was pulled out of hell. So I have that hope. But I can't run around and tell people, just throw the dice and then repent in hell, because that's probably bad form.
Yeah, actually, I agree with you. Now, my personal opinion on the whole hellfire is that it's a literal hellfire that is meant to like cause harm to you. And the reason why I believe this is because like we have a bunch of writings from the Talmud and from the Qumran scrolls, and even from the apocryphal texts that seem to indicate that that was the case, right? So when I see Jesus talking about the hellfire, would I be wrong in assuming that Jesus's understanding of the hellfire was roughly similar to his contemporaries?
No, and that's why I try to preface it with I believe, or I'm a hopeful nihilist. I don't want to be in danger of like saying, whatever, it's all good. And I would agree that the topical level would be that there is some sort of, miserable eternal state. But I think about it. I used to manage golf courses for many, many years, and you don't hire people to fire them, but there has to be a consequence for living your life or for doing the job in a certain way. And obviously that would be being fired. Sorry. But anyways, this, the idea that God's like, if you screw up, there is a punishment. If your punishment was you just rot in the ground, I mean, atheists already kind of believe that anyways. So for it to be at least the threat of a serious judgment, that makes sense to me. But Jesus says, in the end, I will attract all men to me. And so my hope is that created beings, good decisions or bad, don't end up in eternal torment. It doesn't seem to be in line with who I believe God to be. But I could be wrong, and I don't want to lead anybody to hell by saying that.
Yeah, or it could be that there's like the annihilation theory, right? Where because Jesus says that they're going to be like the chaff and the wheat, where the wheat is taken and the chaff is thrown into the fire, and essentially we assume annihilated, right? And there's a lot of support for this. Have you done much reading in the Qumran scrolls?
A little bit. I'm certainly, my bias would be more towards the validity of the Qumran scrolls than, say, the Talmudic scrolls, or the Talmudic writings, which you said.
Yeah.
But I think the Essenes were a little out there. They were a little like end of world culty. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a little bit of a grain of salt kind of thing, where there's some valuable stuff there, especially the historical things. But I think they were pretty fringy.
I think so too. My personal opinion is that I think the Christian movement had like a big part of it came from the Essenes, but there's a hymn in the Qumran scrolls in 1QH 14 where it talks about what happens at the end with the hellfire. And it says about Sheol, right? It says the source of light will be an eternal spring, inexhaustible in its shining flames. All the sons of iniquity will burn, and they will be turned into a searing fire, and all the guilt of men until destruction, which kind of sounds like Revelation 21, right? Where everything's thrown into the lake of fire and is completely annihilated, right?
Yeah, and that's why I would be agnostic on it. I wouldn't make a definite stance. It's one of my problems with organized Christianity is they've made very authoritative stands on things that are more subjective and then kind of defined it as their sect of Christianity. So were things to me where it's not clear or there's contradictory things in the Bible, I would just say I'm not sure necessarily, and obviously would lean on the judgment of God with these things. I did, though, interesting question. I'm curious if you think John the Baptist was in on the Essene thing, or if he had been flirting with that at all.
So I do. I think John the Baptist was a member of the Essenes. For example, have you seen the bathing rituals of the people at Qumran and their many mikvot?
Very similar.
Yeah.
Right. Very similar.
There's a lot of crossover between John's lifestyle and what we find in the Qumran sect. And so I don't know. And it seems to be that he probably was one of them. And the Qumran sect was one of the most, we're going to call it messianic hopeful of the time period. Like they were the ones saying the Messiah is coming now.
Yep. Yeah, they seem to have a very, what Jesus's advent here was, they seem to be very adherent to that prophetically, and it's one of the reasons why I asked about John, because it seems like his idea of what Messiah would be, at least before he went to prison, he was kind of questioning everything, but he seemed to be very Essene in his influence. So I would agree with that. Another thing you mentioned, the wheat and the chaff. It would be my hope, and I think you know my stance. I think we're in an information-based reality, something like a simulation. People give me a hard time for that. But I think that the idea that this is a game, a test, a simulation, a free will simulation for God to kind of weed out the people that don't want to follow him. Like, if he's a good God and you don't like him, he's not going to make you spend eternity with him. And so how does he find this out unless he gives you a chance and gives you rhetorically, he gives you free will. And so in the scenario where the people don't seek after him or think he's a good God and want to spend eternity with him, he's not going to force them to. That wouldn't be good for him. Like, well, of all the ironies, you're stuck in heaven with him. He's like, well, look, I was God and you have to spend eternity with him. That wouldn't be very fair. So the idea that your people choose their way out of it and then God gets to spend eternity with the people that would want to be with him would make sense to me. Kind of like for a bigger meta, why are we here? And in that case, him putting people in hell because they chose to not be with him doesn't seem fair. So I'm very much hopeful that doesn't happen.
Well, I mean, that brings up a good point. It wasn't on my list of questions, but it does kind of lead to a natural dialogue point, which is, why would God have to send anybody, no matter what you think hell is, like, why would he have to send anyone there? So like, if I like sent out a bunch of party invites, and I was like, okay, you're all invited, right? And there was a bunch of people that didn't want to come. Why wouldn't I just say, oh, well, you don't have to come? Like, why do I have to send them anywhere? Why can't they just do their own thing?
Right. So this is my hope, and so this is just VOR's take on this, but I don't think God has the omni attributes as defined. You may have heard me talk about that. I think that he can have known the result, but by choosing to give us free will, he didn't know the result that we were going to, what we were going to end up doing. And so to me, the idea of hell is a threat of punishment. Like, you could be fired as an employee, but really you don't hire people to want to fire them. So my hope is that it's the threat, but that the only way God could actually have free will agents choose or not choose to want to be under his kingship, whatever, lordship, is to give them a chance to choose this. And so, I've talked to the other atheists about this. It's like, why doesn't God just put us in heaven? Well, we wouldn't be free will agents necessarily in heaven if we were just forced to be there with him. So for us to choose that outcome, by the way we live this life, makes sense to me. And it could be that God created a bunch of different iterations of consciousness, how we're kind of tinkering with AI, and a bunch of them were just kind of automatons. And finally, he figured out how to make actual free will agents, potentially even with Lucifer initially, and we saw how that went. But the idea that he went through this immersive thing for people to choose to want to be with him or not, and to choose to be with him on faith, not on proof, as this seems to be part of his currency system. So again, I hope that hell is a threat. It's entirely tenable, though. The center of the earth is a bottomless pit that would burn forever. I mean, for at least millions or billions of years, whatever. The sun is the same thing. So we have proof of concepts of it, and I met a guy who believed he went there. So I don't want to poo-poo the whole thing, but I'm just hoping, like, if I get to heaven, would only be by the grace of God, and he's got a bunch of people burning in hell, including you and the atheist community, I would lobby for you guys, and I would really talk to him about it. Like, really, this is serious. Like, they were right about this, and I would be stunned, and I might even be pissed that it happened. But right now we just don't know. I hope it's a threat. I hope everybody ends up either with him or not in anguish.
Right, but from my point of view, it's kind of a false dichotomy. Like, you're saying, well, it's either with God or it's in like this place of like, you don't want to be there. It's torturous, it's agony, right? But God didn't have to do that. He could have made a separate abode. I don't know what we call it, maybe an abode, where he sent
Reality
all the
abode,
people,
whatever.
and it was perfectly nice, perfectly good. No one's suffering. There's no wailing or gnashing of teeth. It just happens to not be in heaven. Like, he could have done that, right?
Right. Yeah, separate from God. And that's, like, I got to be careful to not start some totally unbiblical theology here, but I would root, like, let's just say hypothetically, by the blood of Jesus, I get into heaven because I'm a sinner and I wouldn't deserve to get there on my own. And it turns out that a lot of you in the atheist community that I've befriended, or even people that don't like me or whatever, you guys are like literally in hell. I would immediately go, just put them in another game board and let them, you don't have to be with them, God. Like, they can just exist aside from you, and they don't, whatever. And like, I know as Christians, we all say we've had these experiences, but I believe I've been in the presence of God, and the love and the intense acceptance that I've felt. I have a hard time believing that that's actually what happened. So I don't know. And I think it would be, if it turns out that way, first off, if we all die and we're worm food, who cares? We all just made shit up. But if we're there and that's the case, I would just hope that there was a justice or a judgment behind it that was fair. But I just don't believe it. I know that's weird, but I don't believe that that's the point of this. So hopefully you guys that choose to not have him, you can just go to a middling reality where things are like kind of good, or I don't even know how that would work, but I don't know. I hope the best.
Yeah, but that's my point, is like, you're suggesting that, like, oh, Holly, thank you for the hearts, that like we have to go somewhere else. But like, even in the most extreme version, which like you don't really like, you're saying, well, the people who don't want to be with God shouldn't be forced to go to heaven because that's where God is. But like, the reality is, like, your version of heaven is like gigantic. It's not like a waiting room in like a lobby somewhere. Like, theoretically, we could be in heaven for eternity and never really come into contact, with the God up there. Like, he created a separate space for us. If it was unavoidable, like if God's presence was just unavoidable, well, I mean, theoretically that just means he's omnipresent, but you don't believe in omnipresence, right?
Well, just we would have to get into the definition of it. I think he can be everywhere. I don't have that problem, but everywhere. When in time? Did he know the future before it happened? Whatever. Just one thing, though, as you said that, it is my belief. So anybody that's dealt with breathing issues recently, the autoimmune condition I've had has affected my breathing. And if you're not breathing, you quickly find out how valuable air is and how much you took breathing for granted. I believe that we are permeated with the presence of God and we feel him. You guys, people that are frustrated with him, I think we're surrounded by and feel his love and presence. We've become nose blind to it. And so it could be that being a created being that chooses to be separated from him could necessarily be anguish, in the same way that if we don't have air, we would be in anguish. So it might not even be, and this is why I try to lean that on his justice and the goodness, but if you choose to be separated from him because you are created by him and you were feeling him and didn't know it, it could be that it's an anguish being separated from him. And it is definitely my hope that people will have to choose to stay separated from him. I've met anti-theists that I'm certain, no matter how anguishing it is, they will not concede and they will decide to be separated from God. So in that case, it could be that even if it's in a middling game board, you've separated yourself intentionally from him, and it's excruciating. And people choose to stay separated from him because they're so convinced he's the bad guy. I think that, but to talk it through, that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, the problem I see with this is it kind of puts like humans in a more powerful role than God. Like you're saying, well, listen, if you don't want to be with God, then God's just going to separate himself from you. And then it's going to be horrible because you're no longer with God. But the reality is, like, I'm not with God right now. Right. And I don't think this is horrible.
I wouldn't call that the reality.
Right. So like,
again, I don't think that's, I think that we are all in the presence and feel God. I'm just curious if you, when you were a Christian, or if anybody else, I remember around the time of adolescence for me, I woke up one day and I felt that I was separated from God. I don't know if it's as an adult, you have to kind of start to choose. And I remember desperately wanting to get back to that feeling. You said in reality, we don't feel God. I think we do. I think that he permeates every pixel of this reality that we are in. So you could be mad at him, but I think that I think that you are experiencing him. And the people that I've talked to that have gone to hell, that's the consistent thing. Like if they go to heaven, the conversation is always, I didn't want to leave and I felt so good and euphoric and everything felt perfect. And the people that go to hell, even if they're not necessarily in a terrible place or burning, they're in this, the feeling of being separated from God is this tangible pain that they are in. So I think we are feeling the presence of God. Again, I think we go nose blind to it.
Well, then that just brings up the question, then why does, like, whatever I'm feeling right now, you're assuming it's because the presence of God is, like, I don't know, here on the earth. Well, then why does it have to be limited? Like, I'm choosing to live without God right now, and I'm still, like, relatively somehow in his presence, which is the reason why I'm not wailing and gnashing my teeth. But why can't that be the permanent state?
So faith is a really bizarre thing. It's basically, I would say, impossible or antithetical to evolution, to survival, to believe something good or whatever. So faith is this really bizarre thing, but to me, this is God's currency, right? We know that, by faith, Abraham was made righteous. Obviously, John 3:16, whoever believes will have eternal life. So I think that this idea of believing in him, even though you can't see him, is very important. And I think it qualifies the test. And a way to think about it, if you've ever managed any retail stores, you have secret shoppers. Because if you know the management's coming, everybody cleans up and dresses up and wears their name tags or whatever. But if it's just a rando off the street, you're just going to see the normal customer experience. And like in the television show Undercover Bosses, the guy who runs like the burger joint, instead of coming and saying, yeah, I'll be there February 18th, and everybody wears their hats and the grout is like scrubbed with toilet or toothbrushes and everything's perfect, the guy actually comes into his restaurant with a stupid mustache and nobody knows he's the owner, and he gets to see what's really going on, right? This one manager's corrupt and he's embezzling, and this one person's being discriminatory and whatever. And at the end of it, he takes off his mustache and everybody's like, oh no, it's Mr. Burger King or whatever. And then what you have is he saw what people were actually doing when they didn't know they were being observed by the manager. So I think the validity of the test is specific to not knowing. And the idea of faith seems to be, according to Scripture, Moses and David and all these guys, the number one thing God is looking for. And so somehow this believing in him without seeing him seems to be a part of the criteria of the test. I mean, he's kind of anonymous creation-wise anyways. You can look at the earth and look at these things and say maybe it was created, maybe it wasn't. So to me, you're here and you're getting to experience it, and without knowing he's there gives you a real idea of your state, just like when undercover boss guy is there, but you don't know he's the boss, you get to see what the employees actually do. So the faith thing is important. He chose to do it where he's kind of hidden, and I think it changes the validity of the test that he's sending us through.
I'm not really sure I follow. Like, you're suggesting that he wants you to like behave a particular way, like not knowing that you're essentially being watched, right? Like he's saying like your behavior in private is more important than your behavior in public. But I think that's unrelated to faith.
Jesus said that.
Right? So like when we're talking about faith, essentially what we're saying is whether or not like you are believed in something and then you're willing to be convicted by it, right? But I don't think that has anything to do with like public versus private practice. Like, so when God says like, if you have faith in me, you'll be saved. Okay. To me, this is a bit problematic, because if the believing and the having faith in him is so critical, then he should at a minimum then give us a reason to believe. Because I would say the same thing about anything. I could say, listen, you should believe in Doug and Sharon, and you don't need to have faith. You don't need to have proof. You should just have faith, because faith is more valuable than the proof, right? You would say, well, listen, but you might value faith, but I value believing in things that are rational, right? So I would say the same thing. I would say, listen, faith might be great, but I think you need to have a reason to put your faith in something before you put your faith in it, or else you're not acting rationally.
I understand that. By the way, I had a revelatory moment, and I concede that Doug is real.
We got him, guys.
He's real.
He's a member of this.
I saw him. He's real. I still don't think he created the universe, but he's real. Okay, I see. Okay, go ahead.
I was saying, well, Doug didn't create the universe. He's just the master of the universe. I think the universe is eternal, and Doug's just the most powerful entity.
Malek Ha'o Rock. Yeah. So I hear you, and I think we have reason to believe. That's a big reason why I do VOR. I thoroughly believe that the scientific record and the data support biblical creation. So I know you don't. We can have that discussion at some point, but I think we have reasons to believe. I think the design that we see, and et cetera, et cetera. But with this scenario, and just this is kind of a thought experiment, but imagine he creates Lucifer, because I think he did. I think Lucifer was a version of AI, and he was super excited.
Wait, AI?
And he's like, check out. Yeah, AI. I think he's basically one of the first versions of consciousness that God created, kind of like how we make AI. AI.
Interesting. Okay.
And he turns, right? So anyways, he builds Lucifer, and he's beautiful, and he's like the apple of God's eye at this point.
Where's this?
And go ahead.
Is this in the book?
I mean, there's allusions to it in the book. With Lucifer, you were above all. You were seated with God or whatever, and you had all the jewels, and you were. I think it's Ezekiel talks about it.
That's Ezekiel 28.
A couple places.
Lucifer is not mentioned in Ezekiel 28, and I don't think that Ezekiel 28 is about Satan.
Well, there's a couple places. I mean, if you want to, you would know the Bible better than I do.
Isaiah 14.
There's a couple places.
One.
Okay.
But I don't think either one of them were about Satan.
Okay.
But
do you want to talk about that?
We could.
Concede that for me right now. And then, if not, do me a favor and concede that for this thought experiment. And if you want to go into whether it's true or not, we can.
Sure.
But
okay.
The idea
that for the thought experiment, then I'll go with like your conception of Satan.
That's what I mean. Yeah. For this thought experiment, just make that concession, but we can look into it if we want to. So the idea that Lucifer was created brilliantly and given free will, and he starts going, you know what, God, no, you're kind of a dick. I'm out. I don't like this. I want to leave, whatever. I think it grieves God's heart, and potentially part of how the whole earth was created was to resolve this issue between the two of them, which, could be substantiated by things like Job or other times where, the serpent is obviously allowed some sort of amnesty and temptation, whatever. Anyways, so when he builds humans, the idea is, I don't want a repeat of what happened with Lucifer. And so if your thought process is, I'm not good, I'm not worthy of this position, you're smarter than me, you kind of are going to judge God, I think you kind of eliminate yourself from being in his presence, maybe even for damage control, because he doesn't need a bunch of Lucifers, burning the place down. So this idea to me that a part of this is God in the state that he gave us, the historical account, the ups, the downs, the goods, the bad. Are you wanting to serve him as creator, or do you not want to? So obviously the atheist community does not want to. If God is real, this idea that he gave us free will and allowed us to self-sort based on our predisposition to not want to serve him makes sense to me, that God would weed out, these people.
Well, I think you're mischaracterizing the atheist community as people that are just openly hostile to God. I don't think that's the case. I think we, for the most part, just don't believe in the God.
Yeah, I don't want to do. I get a lot of flack with the atheist community. This is a weird thing to say, and obviously it hurts me that they're as mean as they are to me. I love atheists. I like them far more than most Christians. I'm totally disenfranchised with organized Christianity. People that know me know I only run with secular people. I've lived a very, very secular life. My heart is for the atheists, and I intend to try to show a version of God that isn't the one that happened in the church or the hypocritical stuff that Christianity's been, that's done for a long time. So I don't want to misrepresent atheism. So I guess I need to say rhetorically, people that think God is evil, people that think God is bad, people that don't like him, don't like the guy in the book, the God in the book, if he is real, it would make sense that he would separate that. He would say, cool, you have free will and you don't like me, you don't have to spend eternity with me. And in a weird quantum way, and I know I'm going to lose everybody by saying this, but the collapsing of the wave function is something that the observer affects. What is the polarity? Is it up? Is it down? We collapse the wave function by interacting with it. And in a sense, God may be the ultimate quantum experiment. And if you think he's good, he ends up being good, and you get to spend eternity with him, saved by grace. If you think he's bad, you're right. Your evil God separated you, and you are separated from him in an excruciating pain. You were right. So it's almost like we determine who God is based on whatever, our experience, our bias, or whatever. And so this being that test, it makes the most sense to me of the Bible and what we're doing here. And it could be wrong, but I think faith is why we started talking about that. Are you willing to trust God? And we see it all over through Scripture. Manna, the Red Sea, whatever. In my life, I took a huge leap of faith 4 years ago and trusted God, and we're still able to do VOR after 4 years, which is crazy. We shouldn't have been able to. God seems to provide, and he wants you to trust him over, let's say, material things. So anyways, it all seems to me like part of the test, and it's necessary in some way. Whatever it is, faith is a currency to him, and he values it far more than obedience. And we know this in Scripture. He wants obedience, yes, but generally, you mentioned about outward behavior. Do you trust him? It seems to be the first step in pass fail.
If I said to you, for I've got a great uncle who's got millions of dollars. He's very wealthy. He's a very wealthy man. You might have got an email from him, I don't know, some time ago saying that you inherited some money and you have to go to Africa and make a deposit to claim the money. But this is my uncle, and in order to get your money, you just have to have faith that my uncle has this money waiting for you. Is that a rational thing for me to expect from you?
I think if you showed me enough reasons to believe this, yeah, I think so. I mean, not, the Saudi prince thing, but it's I know you pretty well. We've worked together off and on for years, and I know you as an honest guy, and you're like, dude, my uncle is this dude, and he wants to, let's say, bless your ministry. He's a Christian, and he wants to fund you to try and counteract what my nephew's doing. he's like, I want to give you a bunch of money. I'd be like, yeah, I'll talk to the guy. If he was some random dude on TikTok, yeah, probably not. Probably not. It would be situationally based.
Right. Okay. So basically, your faith in this position rests a little bit on you trusting me. So I can run with this analogy. So the problem we have is it seems like we have this promise of a great gift of this great uncle that no one's ever heard of, and the message. It's not a great message. I don't trust the messenger. I don't trust the letter that arrived with my name on it. I don't trust any of it, right? So I don't really have a good reason to believe that this uncle exists and that he's got an inheritance waiting for me. And so it seems weird to me that having trust, like I have to believe in this uncle with the inheritance for me, knowing that there's really, like, I don't have any good evidence for it. I don't. And that the message about the inheritance waiting for me seems to have so many problems with it. I think to me, it's silly that like, this is the level of evidence that I'm given, but for some reason I'm still expected to have faith in it. But like, I don't think that would work out for any other religion. Like if I said that, well, this is the case with Islam, like you just have to have faith that Muhammad was the last prophet, and it doesn't matter that the messenger is incredibly problematic, right? I like, you would still say, well, listen, it's rational to believe when there's like some sort of evidence.
Right. I get that. And this is why I'm a young earth creationist. And, you know, as much as I appreciate the work of guys like Mike Jones, Inspiring Philosophy, him and I are buddies, and we've talked about doing young earth versus theistic evolution debates. I get where he's coming from, but if the Genesis account, and I get in a lot of trouble for saying this, if the Genesis account isn't true, I don't think we need to believe in the Bible. And this is where, you know, I might literally die on this hill. I defend Scripture because I believe that the data supports a fully formed universe. I believe us being different. I don't want to get into the whole science thing, but us being different than the animals, the flood happening, and I can't read the chat, but I can only imagine what they're saying. If we were taught, Justin,
don't worry about the chat. You know what they're going to be.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, they love me. So the idea that if we were taught, and I believe this, if we were taught, because civilization begins about 5,000 to 6,000 years ago in Mesopotamia. If we were taught that that's when civilization began, because humans got off the ark, and this is why some of these countries are named after descendants of Noah, and this is why humans are 99% related, and why all these things like the blue eye mutation happened very recently. If we were taught that the biblical flood happened, I think we would be surrounded by the evidence. And I hear you saying this, and this is one of my problems with kind of Christianity agreeing with, you know, theistic evolution, is if the Bible account didn't happen, if the Big Bang happened and evolution happened, then the Bible's, I think, likely not real. And if it did happen, and I think there's evidence to support it, we would be seeing the evidence. You're saying there's no evidence of your uncle. You know, people, again, I just know where this is going to go, but people find clamshells in their backyard in the middle of Kansas, and marine life on top of animals, and marine life on top of mountains, and all of these kind of things that if you were walking around in nature and you found these things and you went, holy shit, a flood happened fairly recently, I think you would see that evidence. So I hear you, and the evidence, the idea of Christianity today, where it's kind of neo-pagan materialism, where the Bible is very allegorical and we actually just evolved and the Big Bang happened, Christianity, it could be taken or left, I think, because that is the evidence that we have. I mean, obviously there's some things about Jesus, but that's a fundamental part of believing in the veracity of Scripture, is believing in the Genesis account, in my opinion. And I think there's evidence for it.
Well, I agree, but Fen, thank you for the galaxy. Like, even if the flood was true, I don't think it gets you the Christianity. Fen, thank you for the triple galaxy, big W. So let me explain my position, right? You know, it certainly could be possible that the flood happened. I don't believe there's any evidence for it, but that's a secondary conversation. But let's imagine that it did. Let's imagine I granted you that there was, I don't know, at least a very large regional flood. Why would that lead me to Christianity as opposed to worshiping Marduk in the Babylonian pantheon?
Right. So the first thing is because that religion is dead.
So I know
it's not as...
I know people who still believe in those gods.
Right. So it would be like, let's say the flood happened, you know, the 200 civilizations that talk about a flood, either massive flooding around the world or the global flood. Which religion, you know, would you adhere to? And you make a good point. 200 civilizations tell the story. The Epic of Gilgamesh tells the story. So you'd have to start looking at other standards. And to me, the standard of the historical accuracy of the Bible, which you and I have talked about that, and you've brought up some good points. But from Nineveh to Babylon to Pontius Pilate, the idea that this is at least a semi-reliable historical book, and that it's a living religious system, basically remaining unchanged for all of this time, would give it validity to me over the other religions that you're talking about that have a flood myth.
I don't think that the fact that we have a book is actually all that relevant, right? So, for example, I've got many hundreds of ancient Babylonian texts that are completely accurate. I've got the Babylonian Chronicles, I've got the creation myths, I've got the war annals, and they're pretty accurate to history. Like, I could assemble them into a book and say that this is true history and is more reliable than the Bible if I just go through and I select the books that I think are the most authentic and the most reliable,
Right.
which is kind of what the Bible is. The Bible is a collection of Jewish texts over the years, right? So I could assemble the same thing with the Babylonian text, make something comparable to the Bible, and then hold it up and say, okay, well, which one's more accurate?
Right. I get that. And I would be absolutely interested in working with you about which one of these, like scholarly and logically, which, if again, under the auspice that the flood happened, which civilization, ancient religious system said that the flood happened is the most believable. And I think we would come to Christianity, the Judeo-Christian belief system. And one of them, you mentioned Babylon, is the creation myth. That if the people are going to love this, if the Bible had a creation account that was not tenable, God was a part of the universe, or came out of a rock or something, I wouldn't believe it. A lot of the other religious systems have the gods coming about through natural processes as a result of the universe. Very few of them pre-exist the universe in an eternal state, which to me is the most easy, the least amount of commitments, the most simple explanation for how the universe got here is an other reality that's infinite that caused the universe to be here. This is how the book of Genesis obviously accounts for this. So it would be creation account, it would be historical veracity. Obviously, you disagree with the prophecies of Messiah, but I think the prophecies of Messiah are really huge. Jesus actually physically walking the earth, the destruction of the temple after Jesus' death. It would be the whole thing, the whole story, the whole all of the evidence put together that would make it the most believable. Not proof, but the most believable of all of the existing religious systems. And then, so really, if that were true, it's what's the most believable religious system now? Christianity, the Judeo-Christian worldview, or materialism, naturalism. And again, I think that the creation account and the idea of God existing outside of the universe and creating this reality is more believable than the singularity or the quantum foam or the big bang or big crunch, whatever. I think it's more believable that something created this. So I believe this in my bias, that it's the most logical, consistent, coherent, historically, scientifically supported worldview on Earth, including scientific naturalism.
Right. And obviously I would just disagree, right? Like, I don't think that Christianity is believable. I don't find it convincing whatsoever. And I think there are definitely more convincing religions, both in the ancient world and probably even in the modern world. But that's, like, you touched on something earlier that I wanted to get around to, and I think we'll get on a rabbit trail if we keep going, which is,
right. I thought this was supposed to be a quiz.
I'm sorry, it is. It was supposed to be. This is what happens. Okay, so this is one of my questions, though, on the quiz. When touching on the topic of heaven, let me ask you a question. Where are the angels right now? All the angels that are created, where are they?
I think they largely exist in the kingdom of God, but they obviously they're able to transition from there to here, as mentioned in Jacob's ladder and in the book of Job, to and from the earth, however this would work.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so they, like, the angels do have a physical presence of some nature?
I think they have a spiritual reality, a spiritual physical construct. But clearly, I believe in the whole interaction in Genesis 6, so they had some version of physicality, at least before the flood. So I think a way to think about it is potentially physical if they manifest here, like what happened with Jacob's ladder. But I would consider them largely in the kingdom of heaven, whatever species or genre. That's a way to explain them.
Right, but we would imagine it's like 1 Corinthians chapter 15, where it says that they have a spiritual body.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So
yeah, sure.
It assumes, though, that they have some sort of body, some sort of physical presence, right?
Well, them coming down and choosing women in Genesis 6 shows that they had some version of physicality that was able to reproduce offspring physiologically. So yeah, there's some sort of physicality, yeah.
I'm with you. We're on the same page here. I got two questions, and the second one is my favorite, more important question. The first one, I just want to get out since we're on the topic. which is kind of how we got here, which is if the angels have, we're going to call it some physicality to it, they're not completely immaterial like God is or whatever, then I think it begs the question, where are they? Because it means that they must be somewhere in the universe if they have a physical presence, right?
Not necessarily. Again, it's so funny. I say simulation, and I think that a lot of the atheists think I came up with this idea, but if you've seen the movie The Matrix, they exist in the physical world, the real world, and they go into the computer simulation. You remember the scene where Neo goes into the Matrix or out of the Matrix, whatever. I think it's something like that. Some sort of, I think it's an extra reality. I think it's a different level in the same way that Minecraft is a digital reality, but the Earth is a separate reality. So I think that the angels, their habitation, and Jude says this, is in the kingdom of heaven, source-based reality, but they can be here in some level of physicality. And I would guess it's some sort of portal. I know,
okay,
really scientific, but
I think what we can sum up is an alternate dimension of some nature.
yeah.
So it's completely undetectable then.
Yeah, you can't detect the physical world and Marcus Persson, who created Minecraft, from in Minecraft. There's no way. Marcus Persson can't actually even go into Minecraft in a physical form. He could put a skin on or whatever, but yeah, you cannot detect the Earth from Minecraft. And I think this is just analogous. I don't think it's a one for one, but I think it's analogous to where source reality is, where base reality is, where God is.
Is it like a single way looking glass where they can see in and see us, but we can't see out and see them?
Obviously multiple people in the Bible interact with them. It's weird. Is a lot of times it's like in a dream state. We don't know. Like John, obviously in Revelation, and even at one point, him or Paul is like, oh, was it the seventh heaven? I don't know. So there seems to be, I don't know, DMT influence, some sort of way to get there with either a mind-altering substance or a mind-altering experience or sleep or something like that. But it's largely not a two-way. This is going to be weird, but
I agree. So that's what I'm getting at. I'm trying to figure out what is that physical barrier, or what is the spiritual barrier, what is the barrier that allows them to see what's happening in our world, but we can't see what's happening in their world.
I mean, I'm going to go back to the Minecraft analogy. It's the same thing. You could watch Marcus Persson look at his computer programs and see everything going on in Minecraft, and nobody from Minecraft sees Marcus Persson eating a donut at his desk.
Right. But okay, so it's the simulation. That's what you're suggesting. And the simulation can't see outside of the simulation, but the simulators can see what's happening inside of the simulation. So fair enough. Yeah. I think that's a decent enough answer. I'm okay with that. But that brings me to the next question, which is a more fun question. And you might have heard this before. So my assumption is that the angels that slept with the women that you have alluded to, right? If they have a physical body that has, we're going to call it reproductive organs, right? Mm-hmm. Why would God make it so that the angel is capable of reproducing with humans? Why would he make that baby batter compatible?
That's a great question, and I'm not sure he was excited about the result of it. So this is one of the reasons I don't adhere to the omni attributes, is the idea of God tinkering or I wouldn't say that he made mistakes, but him creating free will agents and them doing really out of bounds things seems to be something thematically that's going on in Scripture. And so, why they had a sexual reproductive capacity with humans, I don't know. I don't think that was the intention. And obviously, that abomination of the Nephilim was very problematic and, potentially helped contribute to the idea of the flood and some of these, wiping out these ites and these that the soldiers of David and Joshua were doing. So it seems like that created an offspring that God wasn't happy with. So it could have been a mistake. I don't know. I don't know why he would have done this, but it seems to have backfired either way.
Yeah, I agree with you there. So the next question then, because I'm fascinated by this whole fallen angel bit, which is that, am I correct in reading that part of the reason for the flood is to wipe away the Nephilim?
Yeah, now that's not... It's
not explicit.
Canon, right? It's not. I think Enoch talks about it a little bit more. I think so. I think that was part of it. And whether it was specific to at that exact time or the direction, the arrow, the villain arc that it was on, I think the pre-flood world was entirely barbaric and horrific. This is you might know this, you might not know this. It doesn't say in the Bible that children died in the flood. It could be that if they were having offspring, they were consuming them. I mean, it could have been that level of horrible. We don't know. But I think that the fallen angels, the Nephilim, that whole thing was a part of the exponential decay and destruction of God's created order. So whether specifically to wipe out that bloodline or generally to stop that progression, I think that was a point of it. But obviously they cropped back up afterwards. So if the idea was the flood, didn't work perfectly.
That's my question. Okay, so you believe in a global flood, not a regional flood, right?
Of course.
Okay, so if there was a global flood, it should have been able to wipe out all of the Nephilim if it was a global, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've studied this as well as I have, but I would imagine a recessive Nephilim genome in somewhere. One of the wives or...
Okay.
One of the wives.
Okay, so one of the wives of the sons of Noah had the Nephilim blood, and then that was passed on further, eventually, we'll say, to King Og.
Would you agree that the giants spoken of in Scripture, that it's safe to say they were descendants of Canaan?
It's hard to say because so many of them appear to crop up in the land of Canaan, and then they're directly tied to Canaanite clans like the Amalekites and also
right.
the Moabites and the Ammonites in Deuteronomy chapter 2, and the Philistines. They seem to be tied to all of these Canaanite clans.
Right. So that's it. It seems to me like it's possible that part of the cursing of the bloodline may be related to it, and it coming through the offspring of Canaan. So that's where I lay with it. I mean, we know that that's a bad descriptor. We know that Og of Bashan was a giant, and he was very big. We know that obviously David was very big. In Numbers, it says that they go to the Promised Land, and we look like grasshoppers in their sight. And it says specifically that we saw the Nephilim there, the sons of Anak.
Numbers 13.
Which are the Anakim. Mm-hmm. So there's something going, like a lot of Christians don't want to see that. I had an interview with Jason Lyle, and he's like very anti-Nephilim. And I'm like, I get it's science fiction-y, but it's in the book. So
it's in the book. It's all there. Okay, so that leads me to one or two questions still related. Okay, so what happened in the Bible to the angels that slept with the women? What did God do with them?
Punish them in chains.
That's right. He locked them up, put them in chains, according to Jude and 2 Peter, right?
Yeah, we didn't kill them, which is weird, but yeah, he locked them up.
That's right. Okay. So God took these disobedient angels and locked them up. Now, it seems to be that, he overlooked the worst of the wicked angels, Satan. Why wouldn't he lock Satan up in chains in darkness with the angels that slept with the women, since he's done even worse stuff?
Yeah, man, you're going to get me in trouble.
Listen, these are real questions, and you're taking them like a champ, but these are questions that need answered.
With the Christians, God knows my heart is in the right place. I'm trying to rationalize, obviously, some pretty wild things. I rather think that the Lucifer story is much more like the Anakin story in Star Wars. I think Lucifer is very much like Star Wars, and if like Anakin, I think it's a very sad thing. I don't know if he's hoping for redemption at the end. In my world, in my belief system, God was brokenhearted that Lucifer turned, and it's like I created this thing. Maybe I made it too beautiful. Maybe there's a learning curve here. Maybe he's too beautiful. Maybe he's too talented. Ultimate power corrupts. I did this. It's not, if I just destroy him, like I love him, if I destroy him, is that good of me to do? And I think the answer there would be that it wouldn't be. So this is my weird worldview. I think part of the reason the earth is here is I think that God said, okay, son, Lucifer, whatever, you've done this, you think you're better than me, you think you're smarter than me, we're going to handle this on the earth. We're going to go to the earth, middle ground, and you are going to be able to rule over people. If they worship you or serve you, they can get more. I will be hidden behind the ark, or behind the curtain here, and I'm going to show you that I am not the bad guy you think I am, and I'm going to outsmart you by prophesying your defeat when Jesus defeated him. And I think that Satan didn't know. I think he was trying to wipe out the Jewish bloodline for thousands of years because of this prophecy that the seed of the woman would defeat him. And I think when Jesus died, he realized that God was smarter than him, and he had cryptically hidden this, and that Satan lost basically the agreement. So almost like a gentleman's game, and we can kind of see this reflected in the book of Job. There's some sort of weird agreement going on with him and Lucifer.
So does God want Satan to be defeated?
This is where I'm going to get in trouble. I think he would rather that he repents.
Okay, but he knows that he's not going to repent, right?
I don't think so. I don't think God knows what free will agents do. Now, he might know what Satan did, but I don't know if he knew in real time what he was going to do. Big difference.
But it seems to be the case, because Ephesians chapter 1 says that Jesus was slain, or the elect were elected in Jesus before the foundation of the earth, and Revelations says that Jesus was slain before the foundation of the earth, and that everyone was written in the book of life. So it seems to be like he has an idea from the very beginning how the end is going to end, right? That's why it says that God declares the end from the very beginning.
Well, I think the end from the beginning, that's Isaiah, and it says, there is none like me. I think declaring the end from the beginning is the Bereshit prophecy. I know you are aware of it, but literally the first word in the beginning is the Son of God destroys himself on the cross.
I actually disagree, and you're not going to like my take. My take is rooted in linguistics, which is that not a single letter of the Hebrew alphabet has an individual meaning. It doesn't. Those are added by the Kabbalistic authors.
Agreed. Okay, go ahead.
All I'm saying is that so the individual meanings of the letters were lost in transition number 1. So the way the language used to work was like in the ancient cuneiform script, you would have one symbol for an entire word or entire concept, right? And then they're like, well, shit, we got to memorize like 8,000 symbols. That seems awfully cumbersome. And so they're like, well, what if we broke it down and said each symbol is going to be a syllable? So what they did then, they said, well, okay, well, we've got this symbol. It just means parachute. Well, we don't need the whole parachute. We just need the first syllable, the par. So then they said, okay, well, this symbol now just means par. And then we can combine it with other symbols to sound out the words. And then later they're like, shit, we still got like 1,000 symbols. Let's make it even easier. We don't have that many actual sounds. So now we'll take this symbol that means par, and we're going to say it just means p. It just means it's p now, right? So now the letter, the way it's being used is completely divorced from the way it was ever originally intended as a symbol. So when we're assembling words together, like there's no meaning in these individual letters. They were lost thousands of years ago.
Yeah, I understand. I disagree with scholarship on what the evolution of languages. I think that Proto-Sinaitic is the first one. I think it predates all of them. I know it's acrophonic, and it's phonetic, and it's pictographic, and it's numeric, and I know the Kabbalists definitely added to it. As far as were they uncovering coded information, or did they just arbitrarily made it up? Either way, if they made it up, they sure accidentally hit a prophecy of Jesus that they wouldn't have wanted to accomplish. So, to be interested to do, I think we'd have fun doing the Bereshit together and seeing where we disagree on that. I understand your point, though.
Yeah, I don't know if we're going to find any agreement on the evolution of language. As far as I can tell, like the Proto-Sinaitic script came into being roughly like around the turn of the Iron Age, and then like the Proto-Hebrew script would be like around the 9th or the 8th century, very similar to what we have in the Moabite script. But even before that, we had Akkadian and we had Egyptian, and both of those we have a pretty good history of. Like we know the evolution of both of those two languages.
Yeah. Right. So, okay, this is cool, and we can move off of this. Or again, everybody, I was trying to do quiz, but obviously Justin and I
we got sidetracked.
We have a lot to talk about. So, okay, my meta idea of this is that, and it's so cool to talk to someone who knows the Bible well enough and the history enough to push back on these ideas, because a lot of these obviously could be, I live in left field, so they could be way off base. But so I think that the initial tongue was Hebrew, and that Eber was able to keep the tongue after Babel. The idea was that he wasn't involving himself with the shenanigans, the chicanery going on at the Tower of Babel, so he kept Hebrew. So it pre-existed these other systems. After the Tower of Babel, they went off, including Acadia and what had become Egyptian, and they had a different tongue, obviously because of the Tower of Babel. So I think that Hebrew and Proto-Sinaitic predates them. All we have is the cave inscription, which is about 3,800 years ago, which does predate, in particular, Phoenician, and we know that the Phoenician language is a derivation of Proto-Sinaitic. So I think that you could make the argument that Proto-Sinaitic to Phoenician to Greek to all the other, a lot of the languages that we even modern Hebrew. But I think that I just think, and this is obviously I don't have any evidence for this, but I think that Hebrew pre-existed the other ones, and they fractured off at the Tower of Babel. And I think the Bereshit, I understand the pushback on it, but it is really remarkable. Obviously, you know this, but all of those first 7 words. And again, this was about declaring the end from the beginning. And did God know the outcome? I think the Bereshit is potentially partially what he was talking about there. As far as, if you don't want to go in that direction, as far as God having the lamb slain from the foundations of the earth, in the idea that God said, Satan, we're going to hash this out in this game I'm creating, in this, I don't want to marginalize reality, but we're going to hash this out on the earth. The idea that humans would fall and need to be redeemed is a logical conclusion. He saw Lucifer fall already. Very likely that he creates a human that would fall. Now, the idea that Jesus is begotten of the Father is made of the same essence, cloned, whatever. It could be that he's like, you know what, if I make man in my own image, maybe they won't fall. But Jesus being the contingency plan, I think that the idea of man falling and needing to be redeemed was kicked around about, brainstormed, and that's what it means by the lamb slain from the foundation of the earth.
But wasn't it obvious that Satan needed to be locked up just like the angels? So that's kind of where we started this topic, was why didn't God lock the Satan figure up the same way he locked up the fallen angels? It seems to be that he's a much bigger risk.
Right. Well, I mean, the Jews teach that Hasatan is a good angel. It seems like in the test isn't maybe isn't valid enough without the opposition. I don't want to. God obviously says He creates evil, so I don't know. Maybe without the angel devil on our shoulders, maybe they don't eat the apple, and maybe things don't go in the direction that they ended up being. It's hard to say, but obviously God intentionally doesn't destroy Satan. I couldn't tell you his motivation for it. My hope is that he's hoping that Satan repents and whatever, but he could also be destroyed. And I don't think we necessarily know, but it's clear that God didn't lock them up. Just like you said, he locked up the other angels and not Satan. So this is my view. The angels went down, they mated with human women. It was a one-time offense, theoretically, maybe a two-time offense even. And he's like, okay, enough of you guys. We're going to get out of here, right? The problem is we've had thousands of years with Satan. Satan was a liar and a murderer from the beginning, according to Jesus and 1 John. So we've got lots of a huge pattern of evidence from Satan that the guy is dangerous. So to me, it's silly that we've got these angels that they tripped up and they saw these hot women that were like, I need to get a piece of that. And he's like, nope, you're done. And then we got this Satan guy who's literally prowling around like a lion seeking to devour humanity. And God's like, oh, I don't know. Let's give him a chance. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's what the book says. So that's where clearly in the Job situation, there's some pissing contest, gentleman game, banter. There's some sport to it, and that's in the book. So, is Satan a useful idiot to make the test more valid? Is God hoping that he would be redeemed? Does he see this differently? Now, if we are into something like a simulation and this isn't real, like this is weird, but let's say, like in the movie Total Recall. You remember Total Recall? He wakes up from it and he's like, oh.
I love that movie, by the way.
Yeah, I haven't watched it in like 30 years, but I need to watch it again. But he wakes up and he's like, oh, I didn't shoot my wife, and things are okay, or whatever. Or I don't remember exactly what happens, but the idea that's like, it's over, you lift off your headset and you're like, oh, that was crazy. If that's true, then what seemed very serious and what was hard with the suffering and all of the things that happened, in base reality, it's going to be like, I totally believe that. That was crazy. But I don't want to marginalize it, but it's a thing that had passed, and what's happening in eternity is what matters. So, Satan going through all this and flexing his muscles and, I'm going to get God or whatever, at the end of it, the cause of Jesus saving the world and us choosing to come under the lordship of the living God or not is accomplished. So could he have done it without Satan? Maybe, maybe not. At the end of this, could it be that God's like, dude, Satan, I totally let you do that, and you totally accomplished what I want to do. You think you're bad, you're not. It could be that way, but obviously it's not very clear in Scripture, so we can only speculate.
Yeah, actually, I agree. I don't think the Scripture paints a very clear picture of Satan's role. He seems to either A, be God's enemy, or B, God's henchman. And it's not entirely clear depending on which passages you're reading. Let me ask you a couple. I'm going to get back to some of the questions because I think we've exhausted some of these topics pretty well.
Before you do, sorry, one comment on that. I agree with you. Obviously, we agree with Satan's position. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter because the actual choice in a binary sense is, did you choose to believe in God? Did you choose to believe in salvation? The Satan role isn't going to be vital to the plot when those two decisions are actually made. So I just think and I think that we knew more about it. Even more people might be super interested in him because I think he's gonna have a really interesting story.
To your point, though, the thing with Satan somehow being a character that's either, I don't know, forcing you to make a decision on what you actually believe, to me, I think is kind of silly because in 2 Corinthians chapter 4, right, it says that the God of this world has blinded people so that they can't accept the gospel. So it seems to be that the Satan figure is actively preventing people from believing in the gospel, which is counterintuitive to what God wants, is it not?
Absolutely. It's part of why I do VOR is if God is real, if God is real and the devil is real, the devil doesn't want us to believe in God. The devil doesn't want us to believe that Jesus died for our sins. Why God lets it happen? Maybe it's necessary for the thoroughness of the test. I don't know. But the idea that the day Jesus died, Satan realized that he fucked up and that it was like, oh shit, I blew it. This is it. I blew it. From that point on, he can't change the event that happened, the seminal moment in human history, where the Son of the living God shows up on the earth and we brutally murder him, and Satan loses at that time. He can't change that event, so all he can do is change the narrative about it. So I agree with the author of Corinthians that the devil has been trying to obfuscate, rewrite that story. I was debating Daniel Green earlier, and he's like, these people don't believe Jesus even historically existed, and we were having that discussion. It's like at one point, humanity's just going to be like, yeah, he wasn't even real. So if Satan's real, it would make sense that he was defeated by Jesus, and all he can try to do is spin the story. He's just doing PR to try to get people to not believe in it.
Cool. So if he's not doing what God wants, he's doing what God doesn't want, then it would make sense that he would lock him up with the other angels.
Yeah.
Right? So to me, it seems kind of silly that God's enemy is running around doing things that he doesn't want him to do, and God doesn't just click his fingers and be like, all right, enough of you. Go right. Do your time out.
Yeah, I believe that in eternity we're going to be able to look back at the film. I'm a sports guy, I'm an analytics guy, and I think these decisions are going to make sense. And I'd like to think that we even have hey, for this next few years or whatever, we're going to run simulations of what Justin would have done in this case and what Luke would have done and what happened if we did this, and see the different outcomes. I mean, we're going to have time to do those kind of things. So I would lean on the overall goodness of God. I don't believe in the all good thing because it's not what Scripture says, but I believe in the goodness of God and the justice of God, and I believe that the best of bad decisions were always made. But a lot of times they were two bad decisions.
Yeah, I'm not sure what we're going to see if the tape ever gets played back, but I know one thing that you and I can agree on. There's no room for doubt. When you're reviewing the tape, there's one thing that's painfully obvious every time. The play's never over until someone blows the whistle. That's always true. There's no way around that conclusion. The play is live until that whistle gets blown.
Yep.
Okay, so
and don't call a timeout if you don't have them.
100%. All right. So last question. Sorry, I kept you on so long. You've been a good sport. But I think this is a kind of an important question, which is, why does God instruct us to pray?
Good question. So having prayed for a year and a half as my mother, died of this brain tumor, a lot of people know this, and fasting and all the things, it didn't work. And I didn't pray for a long time, and I hardly pray now. I don't know if, whatever, I'm broken on that thing. I just don't, it's like, what's the point? Like, basically my prayer is always like, your will be done. It's like, who am I? Anyways.
That's what David did. Remember in 2 Samuel 24, when he's going to be punished and he has to pick between the three punishments, he doesn't pick. He's like, just let's let the Lord follow me. Let it be up to him.
That's fully where I'm at, dude. 47 years of this shit. I've been through it all, and I just don't, I just trust him. So, yeah, pray for your own little petty thing and whatever he says no. But a good answer, so I'm going to obviously go simulation again. I think it has to do with probability matrices. And I think that prayer increases your probability matrix. What I mean by that is clearly people pray to other gods and their probability matrix increases. We know this, prayer works for different gods. I don't know if it's placebo, I don't know if it's quantum or whatever, but I think generally reaching out and going, you know what, I need help and I believe help is coming, I think is potentially a healthy thing and maybe conducive of success. As far as how a Christian should pray, the idea that God gives us free will, but by intentionally meditating on Him, being able to utilize free will or override your free will, that His will would be done in your life. It could be a consent, almost contractual consent, like what David did there. It's like, you know what, God, I really would like you to do this, and I give you amnesty to work as the Lord of my life. I give you amnesty to work in my life. And so even praying out loud and, making it known, I hate to say this, sounds like new agey, but to the universe, because we have life and death in our tongue, and too many Christians are worried about not saying the word shit, but they're cursing themselves all the time and swearing when they shouldn't. But the idea of saying with your mouth, God, the creator of everything, Melech HaOlam, I want you to be active in my life and I give you amnesty, I think that would make sense as potentially why we would do it, and then it might increase the probability matrix.
So I'm assuming that, when the Bible tells us to pray, it's not just like the Lord's Prayer where He says, "Give us this day our daily bread," so on and so forth, because we can kind of push on that and say, well, this seems to be a mental and emotional conditioning, because once you pray for these things, you're aligning your will with God's will, and you're more likely to live a life that's in alignment with God. But I think we've got more passages that we can point to. For example, like at the end of the Gospel of Mark, it says to pray for the sick, people will be healed, lay your hands on them. And same thing in James, in the book of James, it says to pray for the sick, lay your hands on them. We have a lot of these commands in the Bible that we should be praying for things to happen. Right? Mm-hmm. So I guess what I'm trying to figure out is, if we don't pray for those things to happen, is God just not going to do them?
I don't know what specifically the thing would be, but it seems as though maybe this is why I don't get prayers answered to this level, but it seems as though God's really supernatural interaction with humanity was very specifically from Adam, or Noah anyways, to Jesus. And after that, things kind of just seemed to happen. So I don't know. Again, I'm kind of nihilistic about prayer, although I've seen, as somebody who isn't confident in the efficacy of prayer, I've seen in my Discord, we all have Discords, legitimate miracles over the last 2 or 3 years. Is this just individuals thinking positive thoughts, or is God hearing this? I don't know, but I've literally seen a guy come back from the dead. It was the craziest thing. One of our sisters, her husband's heart stopped, and we got a message he was dead, and we all prayed, and the next time we heard from him, his heart was back up, and then he was going to have brain damage, and he didn't. I've seen a bunch of those kind of things. So I don't know if it affected it or not, but my thought is that Scripture says to do it, and so I don't necessarily understand it, and I don't pray with the idea that I'm going to get everything that I want, but I think earnestly reaching out to God is something that he commands. It's funny you mentioned that about Jesus, and they go, teach us how to pray. And so he teaches them how to pray, not the thing to recite every day. It's like the irony, like the frustration Jesus had to deal with. He's like, this is how you pray. You thank God for your food. You thank God for life. You tell him to remind you to forgive your enemy because, you are somebody else's enemy too, and you need to have grace. You ask God to be God over your life. And we just recite the Lord's Prayer without thinking religiously. So he was talking obviously about the bigger thing, and Jesus prayed too. So clearly there's something there, if the Bible is true, where connecting with God and revealing these things in your heart, there's a value proposition to it. I don't fully understand it, but I think it's the best practice.
So I kind of touched on something that I think kind of is at the heart of what I'm trying to get to with this initial question, which is that, is God answering prayer? Does God intend to answer prayer by literally intervening in the affairs of mankind? So like if you pray, you said you pray for someone and they came back from the dead, right? Is that what God wants us to expect? We should be able to pray for things and things like that happen?
I mean, that's what Jesus said, right? So so again, an important point here is you would agree, having studied religion, world religions, that people of other proclivities pray and have their prayers answered, right? Would you agree with that?
Yes, actually, I've seen quite a few Eastern healers report lots of healing miracles.
Right. So again, after talking to me, you can see how I make very little fans. I've even niched myself out of definitely mainstream Christianity. But anyways, if we are in something like a simulation, which again I think Jesus was talking about, you could take a mountain and tell it to go in the sea, and he curses the tree and it dies, and he's healing people non-locally, remote healing people. I think that the interaction that we have with the universe is a specific user to simulation effect, and I think that you can basically have the effect even if you don't include the living God. I don't suggest anybody do this, but if the collapsing of the wave function, which has been repeatedly shown in science over and over and over, is true, and we know that the placebo is true, what you believe affects the probability matrix.
I agree with you. I'm not disagreeing on the placebo or anything like that. We actually agree there. What I'm asking is, does God intend to intervene by answering the prayer? Like your friend that was raised from the dead, would your friend be raised from the dead had they not
came back? His heart came. I don't want to make any claims. Like I don't want it to go out there that VOR is raising people from the dead. His heart stopped and was stopped for a couple minutes, and they resuscitated him. I just want to be clear.
Right, but no matter
the Lazarus event, but
no matter how you interpret it, right? We're suggesting that prayer was answered, like God intervened on behalf of mankind to answer the prayer, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so the question I would have then, if you guys didn't pray for this person, would the same outcome have happened?
I have no idea, bro. I have no idea. I mean, they posted it on YouTube, and it got a bunch of views. I watched it real time, and between you, me, and the wall, I didn't believe anything. I thought he was dead. I've been through the ringer. I'm not a good faith guy. I tell people, don't ask me to pray for you because my prayers suck. I don't generally expect prayers to be answered. There was a bunch of people there, the fervent prayers of God's, righteous or whatever that is.
Yeah, the prayer of the righteous is, I forgot the King James
very
version.
effective.
Yeah,
right.
That's good enough. Yeah, you got it, yeah. Oh, the prayer of a righteous man availeth much.
There you go. That's even better. That's what it is. Availeth much, and it availeth that day. So was it the other people? Was it the white? Is there an amount of faith that anyone can have in anything that could have a physical manifestation on the earth? Probably. As it relates to God, I believe that the Christian walk isn't God is a genie. I think most Christians, it's just this neo-militant, neo-pagan materialism. Basically, very few people are like actually doing Christianity. It's like their job is mammon, as you would imagine, and they go to church for an hour. They think they're killing it or whatever. The walk that Jesus talked about was very immersive, and it was people were poor and suffering and struggling and persecuted and maybe even dying for it. So I think that your standard Christian that's got 2.5 car garage and whatever these things, and they're like praying for this raise, I don't think that's what was being talked about.
No, I mean, we agree on that. I guess the point that I'm trying to get at is it seems to me that prayer has a problem, and one of two things that seems to be the root of the issue. One, if God wants you to pray for something to manifest, for something to happen, then it kind of entails that he wasn't going to do it unless you prayed. Now, the other thing too is if he wants you to pray in order for him to act, then it seems weird that more often than not, when you pray for him to act, he's not going to do it. So then people would say, well, that's because the thing you prayed for wasn't in his will. But listen, if we have to pray for what's in God's will, then shit, it's already in his will. We shouldn't have to pray for it.
Right.
He should do it.
I get that.
So what's the prayer for?
So again, I think that the idea would be a kind of a holistic approach where your relationship with God is more than just an incidental, and you call on him as your genie. It's more of a tied in daily, experience. And I think that the more Christians kind of take that route, potentially the more they're leaning on God, potentially the more this prayer is efficacious. And I've seen that in my life. I've seen that in the Discord group and with other people. So I don't mean to be too middling with it, but your point is very valid, and I get both sides of it. And so I very much believe we have free will. I very much believe that what we think and how we act affects reality. I think there's far too many Christians that are gossiping at work and doing a terrible job and complaining about their boss and stealing when nobody's looking and praying for a raise. So fundamentally, I would say as a Christian, the goal is to be the same in private as you are in public, and to try to really come under his lordship. And your prayer life with him then would be more of a directive, not a Hail Mary. It would be more immersive. And having tried to do that, I've seen it be more effective. So it's I know it's a middling answer, but to say the standard Christians to just pray that the Broncos win on Sunday is bad for them, and I don't think they should expect for that to happen. And I think it's a much more immersive thing that God is doing. I also think it's in the best practice. I think people, so I'm not saying to Christians that they shouldn't pray, but I'm not surprised that not every single prayer is answered. I just don't think that's what we're doing here and what God is saying in prayer. Just say anything and I'll give it to you. I don't think that's the point.
No, I agree. I'm not saying that Jesus, although he does say that.
I know. As soon as I said it, I was like, Dustin's gonna,
Listen, I'm not gonna pounce on you for that, but he literally says that. But don't worry.
Trying to stop it as it was coming out. Wait, but he says that.
Yeah, I've been there. Don't worry.
I might have quoted it better than you quoted the other line. I almost word for word quoted what he said.
All right. Listen, I've kept you for a long time. I gotta. I'm not streaming late tonight because I've got to catch a flight early in the morning, so I've got time for one more guest. But I appreciate you coming up and having a good conversation with me. I think these conversations are fun, even if they're not fun for everybody. I think they're fun for us. So thanks for coming up.
Oh, absolutely. Safe travels, and thanks for having me on.
All right. Cheers. Good to see you, Vor.
Cheers.
Vor took the questions well, I think. So we've got a little bit of time left. Let me grab some super chats, and then we'll move on to another guest. We've got VVVVVBVV in the guest box. So we'll grab V next. But Texas Panhandler, thank you so much for the super chat. It says, welcome to the Bible where everything's a metaphor and the words don't matter. Good to see you today, man. Well, thank you so much, Texas. Actually, I saw you multiple times throughout the day. I saw you at the Unapologetic show, and then I saw you on the Atheist Experience, and now you're here. So thanks so much, man, for supporting the evangelical ministry of atheism. Definitely appreciate that. And Inglaba, thank you for the super chat. It says, shower, then toilet, all good if you have a bidet. Actually, here's the thing. I don't have a bidet, and I know that a lot of people really like having a bidet, but I can't bring myself to shoot water at my anus. It just there's something about it that just like I can't get behind it. Like maybe if the water is heated, I could work on that. Like if it was like hot water, I might be able to work that out. But like my brain is envisioning like every person has had this scenario where like you took a deuce and the water came up and splashed you on the bottom and you're like, woohoo, I don't like that at all, right? To me, that seems like a bidet. That's what my brain is envisioning. I'm probably wrong. I could be wrong. Maybe a bidet is pleasant. Maybe you love it. But the fact of the matter is that's what my brain is envisioning. That cold, anyways, that's a lot. I don't want to belabor the point. But thank you, Mason, for the super chat. It says, have you researched divine madness? I think a good majority of religious individuals suffer from it, Christians in particular. I haven't researched it, but there's a couple variants of it that I have researched. So, for example, you might be familiar with something like Jerusalem syndrome. Jerusalem syndrome happens pretty often. About 100 people a year are diagnosed with Jerusalem syndrome and end up hospitalized. It's where people go to Jerusalem and they're so overcome emotionally and mentally by like the spiritual nature of the holy city that they start to get delusions and they believe that they are a reincarnated Jesus or that they're the Messiah. And it's referred to typically as Jerusalem syndrome because it's just so common. People make a trip over to Jerusalem and then they enter psychosis. So yeah, that's as far as my study has gone. I've studied, other historical situations like the dancing plague, I think is another example of that type of a situation. But yeah, it's certainly an interesting topic. And Tarek, thank you for the $2 super chat, says, how many laws not in Old Testament did Jesus give? Well, technically one. He says, a new law I give you. I believe in the book of John, it says, love others as I have loved you. But that seems to be the only new law. Everything else that Jesus did seemed to be a tweaking or a modification of the old law. And Unashamed Apostate, good to see you tonight. Thank you for the super chat. It says, if Jesus doesn't text back, is he Holy Ghosting me? I think so, actually. I think so. Here's the thing. If I had children and I loved my children and they just wanted evidence that I loved them back, there's nothing that would get in my way. There's not a single thing that would get in my way of making sure that my children knew that I was here for them and I loved them, even if they didn't want anything to do with me. Nothing my child could do that would make me not want to be with them. Steve Harvey Oswald, crazy name, but Big W, thank you for the super chat. It says, can Doug grant my hog an extra inch or two in length so that I can be even more rock hard for him? That's not a question that I've asked Doug. Let me think on that. I don't know. What I do know is that the more rock hard for Doug you are, the more bolder you get. So whether or not that ends up in elongation, I'm not really sure. Just remember that Doug is a little bit girthy, so it's hard to tell. I'll pray on that one, Steve. And Aaron, thank you so much for the $10 super chat. It says free will, the fall, sin nature. These are all post hoc rationalizations for the broken, chaotic world that we've always known. Even God in Genesis seems unprepared for it and has to make a plan. Actually, you're right. Maybe like a plan B. So, Aaron, this is actually my reading of the text. When I'm reading the text, I'm seeing a bunch of ancient people grappling with the chaos of the world, trying to make a mythological explanation or some sort of a explanation for why the world is the way that it is. And to me, I think that's the easiest reading of the text, is there's got a bunch of people that are kind of trying to explain why we have this world of chaos. They're doing it in real time. And then they're like putting patches on it. Like, oh, we need a Band-Aid here. We need a Band-Aid there. Oh, there's a plot hole here, right? It's like a game of whack-a-mole. Every time a new problem comes up, whack it, and then a new problem comes up. That seems to be how the biblical text reads, to me at least. And Randy, thank you so much for the $5 gifting of Deconstruction Zone memberships. Guys, our goal is swiftly approaching. I'm trying to get to 1,200 Deconstruction Zone memberships. Thank you so much for everyone who's already a member of the Kraken Crew Elite and has access to the cheat sheet. I've got some big updates happening to the cheat sheet. I apologize. I kind of got behind doing other things, but we're getting some new updates dropping real soon. So a big W for everyone who's already subscribed. And Crazy Kaiser says, if the God of Abraham exists, I am his enemy. You're definitely an anti-theist. Yeah, I get you. I'm in agreement. If that God exists, the way it's described in the Bible seems repulsive to me. And Space Lord of 75, thank you for the super chat. So religion is a hell of a drug. Yeah, it really is. It provides like some cognitive and emotional benefits for those who believe it. But boy, once you stop taking the goods, you see a whole different world. You know what I mean? Once you've detoxed, the way you view the world, you can't go backwards. You know what I mean? But thank you so much for the super chat. I appreciate that. We had a bunch of super chats because we talked to Vor. We talked to Vor for a long time. We've got like 30 super chats. Aris, thank you for the super chat, though. Big W says, why would God make man with a dependency on his presence? Yes, that was a point I was getting to. Why would he make man dependent on his presence at all? Says it's a bullshit choice, creating something that needs you and then giving you a choice to separate. I agree. And that's kind of what we were saying before. Listen, if you really love your children, nothing could separate you from your children. It wouldn't matter what decisions they made. I would never want to be separated from my child. Even my child didn't want to be with me. And Adele, thank you for the $5 super chat. Says, if you know Jeezy is coming, you should wear your best robes, Vor. Actually, I wanted to get into what does soon mean? Why does God in the Bible promise that he's coming soon, Jesus at least, and then he never does come? We didn't get time for it. Just one of those situations, you know? But Chip, thank you for the $10 super chat. Says, Vor, your whole secret boss scenario precludes God being omniscient. Experiences of the divine can be replicated by music alone. I agree, actually. That's why I was trying to poke a little bit on whether or not he actually knows more than we like to give him credit for in Vor's worldview, where he's not omniscient. But he seems to be behaving in this way in which he is omniscient. But yeah, the secret boss to me, I don't know if that analogy was helpful for the discussion. But thank you for the super chat, Chip. And Joel, El Colto, thank you so much for the super chat. Says, I don't think free will exists unless we have the option to go back to not existing after we die, instead of choosing between two eternities because of a moral code we did not ask to be a part of. Yeah, I actually agree with you. So we didn't get around to the free will topic, but the fact that the way it's laid out, right, is that God gave us a choice. And if we make the wrong choice, there's hell to pay, so to speak, right? And so, but the weird thing is, that's not a real choice. Like, that's coercion at that point. Like, if you think if I don't make the right choice, something bad is going to happen to me, well, that's not true love. That you're not really you're not giving the love that God really wants, because you can't give coerced love. That's like the same reason why a captive woman can't be your bride. She can't consent. Captive women don't have consent. We're essentially captives. Captive human beings can't consent to Yahweh. And Rock Hard for Doug, thank you so much, says, I was minding my own business this evening, and Doug appeared to me, sending me here to stop the blasphemers. Hail Doug and Sharon Stone. Praise Doug, the Rock of Ages. I'm with you. And Sharon, the ever-loving Rock Hard consort of Doug, the co-redemptrix. And Vic, thank you so much for the 1999 OP. Big W. Really appreciate the support in the channel. It goes a long way. And Adele, thank you so much for the $10 super chat. It says, rock hard for Doug, but under my incredibly soft, don't take Doug's love for granted blanket leads me to believe we can be hard for Doug and his heart is soft for us. Actually, that is true. Obviously, though, Doug only has a soft heart metaphorically. He's always rock hard for you, but his heart is always thinking of you. Doug always loves you. He never turns his back for you. That's why he's so rock hard. He's unchanging. And Zakul, thank you for the super chat. Says the Almighty Doug has sent his Messiah, Justin. He has. I am the Messiah of Doug. If you know, you know. And Vor Chip, thank you for the super chat. Says Vor needs to watch Gutsick Gibbon and Dr. Joel Duff. Young Earth creation is literally impossible. I think he has, actually. I don't think he's debated Gutsick because I don't think she's on YouTube, but I'm pretty sure he's engaged with her content. Fairly sure of it. I would be shocked if they haven't crossed paths, to be honest. But I love Gutsick. And Space Lord says, young Earth creation doesn't even work with history. Adam would be dead less than 100 years before writing was invented. Makes no sense. Well, Vor did address that. He doesn't believe in the scholarly opinion on the evolution of the languages and the history, right? So he's got an alternative history, alternative language. So I think that's the way he would solve that puzzle. And Carlos, thank you for gifting out 5 Deconstruction Zone memberships. I really appreciate it. Big W, that's 5 more people with access to the cheat sheet. And Mr. Morpheus, good to see you, friend. He says, where's the evidence we are made of dirt, please? Yeah, now that I don't believe at all. I don't believe we were made from dirt. But I have talked to Vor on that particular topic. We didn't get around to it tonight, but that's a really fun topic. And Fierce Interaction, welcome to the Kraken Crew Elite. You're part of the top echelon. And Adele, thank you so much for the super chat. It says Marcus from Unapologetic this morning created a new drinking game. Kraken shots anytime Christians super chat and send you money. Yeah, I know, he really is. I love it when Christians are so mad that I exist that they're willing to pay money to debate me via super chat. That's my favorite thing ever. And Angry Amalekite Infant, holy shit, great name. Big W says, at Mindshift released a video on Peter Abelard, 12th century heretic who challenged the church with 158 yes or no questions. He was the proto-Justin. You're actually right, actually. There's a lot of people. I would say Celsus was maybe the earliest real good critics of the Christian movement. Celsus and Julius and Porphyry, all of those are early opponents of Christianity. And shit, you might even include somebody like Trypho the Jew. You can include him. But Big W and Sarah, thank you so much for the $10 super chat. Sarah says, I'm newly deconstructing. How does the Bible justify free will when it says God has a plan? It's odd that an all-knowing and loving God would plan on sending people to hell simply for not believing. So this is actually a point that I've made a lot, and it's very important, I think, to the deconstruction community, because we're all asking the same question, right? If God has a plan and he's all knowing and he set everything into motion, Chet, thank you for the money gun, Big W, buddy. And the confetti, shit, I just saw that. Thank you so much, Chet. So if God set everything into motion, he knew everything was going to play out the way it played out before he set things into motion, and he chose not to change any parameters. He chose not to tweak a single thing. He didn't change any recipe inputs. Then everything that plays out was by God's design. God caused it to happen, which means we don't have free will. I agree with you there 100%. And Riley, thank you so much for the super chat. It says his hermeneutic seems to be reading the Bible through the lens of pop culture movies and video games. It's a little bit of a zeitgeist reading, I would admit. But I mean, listen, the thing I do like about Vor is he's looking at the Bible and he sees the same problems that we see. He's looking at that. He sees the issues. He's just inventing more creative answers for them than most Christians would. They're very imaginative. But he's a good sport about it. Penelope, thank you for the super chat, though. It says, is sci-fi slant the new religion? It is actually. The sci-fi, quantum woo, quantum entanglement, simulation, that's like the new thing, right? So some tech bros are becoming believers, eye roll, and the Google quantum computer and chip are named Sycamore and Willow, a sly wink to the trees. I think it is a wink to the trees, but I don't think it's a look at the trees argument. You know what I mean? But Dunzo, thank you for the rock star. I appreciate that. I really do. But you're right. There's a number of, we're going to call them simulation bros out there that are taking it more seriously. I I wouldn't give them too much credit. But Rory, thank you so much for the 1999 Big W, Rory. I appreciate that. Good to see you tonight. It says the Doug abides. Don't panic and keep your towel close. John M. Allegro, Paul Stamets, and Terrence McKenna have discovered a common story about mushrooms. First, NHI to come from other solar system that created guide lives. What do you mean by NHI? Am I missing something? What's NHI? Does anyone know what NHI means? Am I out of the loop here? Non-human invertebrates? I don't know what that means. Non-human intelligence, maybe. Okay. The first non-human intelligence came from another solar system. Maybe. I mean, it's possible that Earth was seeded with an intelligent entity of some nature. That is certainly possible. But I don't know. I think there's intelligent life out there. I think it's unlikely that intelligent life has found us. The universe is just so damn big. If we haven't found them, I don't know if they found us. But Larry Beck, thank you so much for the $10 super chat. It says the guest is boring. I'm sorry, Larry. I know long conversations where there's no real cooking happening can be boring, but I've been meaning to talk to Vor for quite some time and catch up on a couple items. Chet, thank you so much for the balloon. I appreciate that. Big W, Chet. And I knew Vor would give non-standard answers to my questions. So when I saw him in the guest box, I really wanted to hear his answer to my questions because I knew that they would be different from the average Christian. I knew they'd be interesting. But the thing of it is, like, if I was talking to a normal Christian, it probably would have been mostly pretzeling. A couple more super chats, guys. Cam Bam, thank you so much, says, I don't like the Vor interview format tonight. I'm sorry. It wasn't supposed to be a Vor interview tonight. It was supposed to be pretzeling. It just happened to be that Vor showed up tonight, and I wanted to have a good, long conversation with Vor, because we only get to talk like every couple months, maybe once or twice a year. You know what I mean? It's not like we get to interact a lot. But Riley, thank you for the $5 super chat. It says, general reminder to the caller, or that the caller started off with, I don't want to invent a new religion. Actually, that's a good point, Riley. The stuff that Vor believes might border on a different version or different religion than what most Christians believe. I don't think you're wrong there. I think he's way off from mainstream Christianity. But then again, a lot of Christians have beliefs that are non-standard, and I don't know, we still call them Christians. It's hard to say. Space Lord, again, thank you for the super chat. Says, what's the point of being God if some 2-bit loser, yeah, with a $2 prayer yearbook can F your plan? George Carlin. That's a really good quote from Carlin. And this goes to what I was saying, like God inventing his own enemy seems like really strange. It's a really weird thing to do. That Satan exists at all is crazy. And Master Machete, you're good to see you tonight, my friend. Thank you for the super chat. It says, bruh, show some evidence. You make little fans because you have a bunch of BS claims without any backing. Put up or shut up. So he does do some videos. I don't find him convincing, but he does do a lot of like, I hate to say it because I don't want to offend him, like pseudoscientific videos. Like he doesn't agree with mainstream science, but he's trying to engage. He's attempting to engage in the science to justify his positions, at least, which I think is more than what most Christians are doing. Most Christians are okay just saying like, well, you have to have faith even despite the science, or they'll just say, no, the science is meaningless. They're wrong. I think Vor is trying to say, no, there actually is science for my position, and here is the science. I just think that science isn't very well founded. Woven Joker, thank you for the super chat, says, hail Doug Tannic cult. Ave Sharon Stone, praise Lord Spanky, and Archduke Rocky, princess commanding 69 legions of gravel trucks, ad majorem Doug Glorium. Big W Wolven, thank you so much for the super chat, and hail Doug, hail Sharon, and their son Rocky, and definitely W for all of our other fantastic cult deities like Spanky, like Roland the Goblin, like Klomadrov. We got so many good ones to pick from nowadays. Flying Spaghetti Monster. And Evan, again, thank you for the super chat. Says, I've brought people back from the dead with CPR. I'm God. Actually, that's a good take. Listen, CPR is way more effective from bringing people back from the dead than prayer. If somebody's dying and you're like, listen, I could pray for them, or I can do CPR. I'm picking CPR every single time. That's what's happening. Pump the chest, breathe into his face, hit him with the paddles, do what you can. That seems to be the most likely way to bring him back. And Meg, thank you so much for the $10 super chat. I appreciate that. Our $19.99 super chat. Good to see you, Meg. It says, so you prayed for a guy in the ER getting medical help. Guarantee you wouldn't have seen a miracle if you were praying over him in his kitchen. He would have been dead and stayed dead. We do this every day in the ER. That's actually a really good point, Meg. There's a lot of times that people are getting medical care and then they come back, and it seems obviously because they're receiving medical care, not because of the prayer. So for example, like my mother in 2010 passed away for a period of about 15 minutes. There was praying, there was CPR happening, there was all kinds of stuff happening. She eventually came back. I credit the CPR. That's what I think brought her back. I'm going out on a limb. I'm pretty sure that's why she came back to life. But I'm certainly happy she came back to spend time with us. And Hermit, thank you for the super chat. It says, nothing fails like prayer. I agree. It's weird that God instructs us to pray, especially for things that are miraculous, and then he just chooses to not answer it. Such a weird thing to do. And Wool Light Mammoth, I love the name as always. Thank you for the $5 super chat. It says, caller must work on a ranch with all the BS he's bringing. I have never heard that before. That is actually a really good play on words. I really appreciate that. I really do. That's good. That's really good. And Chris, thank you for the super chat. It says, any chance of a collab with Brandon from Mindshift? So actually, I've been in talks with Brandon. We are planning on doing an episode. We haven't got around to it. We're both busy, and it's in the works. It's happening. We're going to do it. I promise. we haven't got to it. I apologize, but we're getting there. And Flanker 420, good to see you tonight, friend. He says, Vor comes off as a guy who really wants Christianity to be true and convincing himself it uses woo science. I agree. I think he wants it to be true. I think he's emotionally and invested in it, and he's gonna do what I did when I was a Christian. He's gonna stay invested until the absolute last shoe drops. He's going to exhaust every possible resource before he's willing to say, okay, well, maybe it's not true, right? And that just goes to show how stubborn some of us believers can be. I was very stubborn. I could have left 10 years before I left, knowing what I knew. I was stubborn. You know what I mean? It's a process. It's a long journey. You know what I mean? But Spencer, thank you for the super chat. Spencer says, Doug appreciates rum, but his favorite drink is gin and tectonic. Guys, I can't believe I've never thought of this. I'm going to make a drink for Doug. We're going to make a gin and tectonic mixed drink, and we're going to call it the Doug. So here's what I want. Anyone who's already in the Discord, go start making your best alternative gin and tonic recipes. Let's see if we can come up with something really good. A really interesting mixed drink contains gin and tonic that is unique, and we're going to call it the Doug. And I'm going to start drinking it during the live stream, and we're going to start a new movement. I feel like it has to include gin and tonic to be true to the name gin and tectonic. I think we can do it. Obviously, there's going to be a big ice cube because it's going to have to be on the rocks. This is a good idea. Let me know your thoughts on mixed drinks. I'm not a good recipe guy for mixed drinks. I'm just good at consuming them. But Morpheus, thank you for the super chat. It says, just listen to George Carlin. Listen, Morpheus, I love, and you sent me some George Carlin clips that I listened to. I love George Carlin, one of my favorite comedians, top 3 easily. Angelfish, thank you so much for the $10 super chat. Big W. Angel says, God's love is often conditional, whereas parental love can be unconditional. This demonstrates that parents may exhibit a more loving nature than the traditionally conceived all-loving God. I'm with you on this, Angel, and I've brought this up a lot. I'm a parent. There's a lot of parents here. A lot of you agree with me. Put a 1 if you agree with me. There's not a single thing, and I say this with all sincerity, there is not a single thing, nothing my son could ever do that would cause me to either remove them from my presence, not want them to be with me, or to make them suffer. Nothing. There's nothing. My child could walk up to me tomorrow and say, Dad, I'm going to stab you, and then put the knife in my side. And that still wouldn't be enough for me to want that my son to be taken away from me or to be in a place of torment and whatnot. Nothing could do, because like anyone who has a child knows that unconditional love that you have for your children. Johannes, thank you so much for the super chat. It says sim theory requires faith, so it solves nothing. That's actually a really good point. I think it does require a lot of faith. I think it's more than the biblical theory, to be honest. But simulation theory does play on something really interesting, which is like if it is possible that if it is possible for our existence to be simulated, then it's almost a guarantee that there is a simulation of our existence. But this is only true, not in the God scenario. It's only true if you believe that the universe is eternal, meaning we've had an eternity of intelligent beings evolving and technology evolving to the point that they were able to create a simulation. Because otherwise, like if you're just attributing it to a God, then the simulation is superfluous. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't solve any problems. It just makes one like level of abstraction. It doesn't like fix anything that like, because if you have a God, then you don't need a simulation. God can just click his fingers and boom, he's got whatever he wants. But Johannes has a good drink recipe. Says allergic to juniper, no blood of Doug for me. Oh, so no recipe. Listen, juniper is amazing, and I guess that means you can't have gin if you can't have juniper. But the good news is you can still have Kraken. Doug is an advocate for the Kraken, so I mean, you get something. Rachel, thank you for the super chat. Rachel says, Doug saved me from an uncomfortable situation at a game. Lady asked me if I knew the Lord. I said, I'm rock hard for Doug. She moved to a different row. Hell yeah. Amen. That's what I'm talking about. The prayer of Doug is always faithful. So listen, you were faithful and righteous in laying firm on the claim that Doug is God, and Doug came through for you. The prayer of a righteous Dougite availeth much, and it seems like you didn't even have to pray. Doug just knew what you needed. Amen. Hail, Doug. And last one, O Discordia says, can we do vodka and tectonic? Gin makes me fall down. Well, some gin will do that. I think vodka would do the same thing. But here's the thing. I don't know. Me personally, I don't like the taste of vodka. To me, it just kind of tastes like rubbing alcohol. Like gin and whiskey and the other like liquors, they actually taste like something. They have flavor. So like to me, vodka is like the water of the alcohol world. Like water's boring, doesn't taste like anything. I could care. I couldn't care less about drinking water. To me, it's boring. Vodka is the same thing of the alcohol world. It's boring. It doesn't taste like anything. Like, yeah, you can mix it with like everything because it's like mostly flavorless, but like, I don't know. I would prefer to mix it with something that tastes good. Like some tequila. Yeah, I love me some tequila actually. Like all brands of tequila, unless it's like so bottom shelf that like it's made poorly and like it's got like really weird remnants of the distillation process, like they didn't clean their equipment or something. But yeah, I love it all. Anyways, guys, that's all the super chats. Thank you so much for the super chats. I went way longer than I thought it was going to be because I didn't realize I was going to have so many super chats. And I'd love to stay later, but unfortunately, guys, I really can't. I've got to be up at like 4:30 something in the morning. I've got a super early morning flight for work this week. I'll be live during the week. I don't know if I'll be able to take any guests on TikTok. I'll have to take all my guests over YouTube because of the way my streaming setup is. I might have enough processing power on my virtual machine to stream like I normally do. I'm figuring that out. I gotta do an experiment with that. I might be able to do it the same way while I'm on the road, but I don't think my laptop has enough processing power to do what I'm doing on my desktop computer. We'll see. I have to wait and see. Anyways, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you staying with me through that long conversation. I know long conversations are like super boring for a lot of people, especially if it's just one guest. But I'll be live again this week. We'll do our regular cooking shows. You know how we do it. We're going to be doing the debates Wednesday night, Friday night, Sunday. We're going to be doing the same old typical debates. We're going to be cooking. So definitely catch up with me again on Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday at the usual times. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate all the super chats and all the shares, all the likes, all the gifts. So thank you so much for all that. And guys, make sure that you're supporting everybody else in the community as well. We've got lots of great creators in the community. Who's live right now that we can go raid? Who's currently streaming that we can send all of these, these heathens to go raid? I'm sure somebody's live that we can go take a look at. I'm going to check YouTube and TikTok, see who's live right now, and see what we got here. Someone's saying Cyber's live. Yeah, okay, Cyber's live. Okay, let's see who else is live. Not too many people are live right now. Shit, okay. All right, looks like it's weird that Cyber Deconstruction's live, but he's not on. Is he not streaming to YouTube right now? Because I don't see him on YouTube. Usually he's live on YouTube and on TikTok. What's happening with Cyber Deconstruction? Oh, he is live. I don't know why it wasn't. It wasn't showing for some reason. All right, listen. Everyone on TikTok already knows Cyber Deconstruction. I don't know if everybody on YouTube knows Cyber Deconstruction. So this is what's going to happen. I want to send everybody over to the YouTube stream for Cyber Deconstruction. I'm going to put it on the screen here real quick. I want to make sure that you guys can see his profile. 1 second. There we go. There's Cyber Deconstruction, and his name is showing here. It's Cyber Deconstruction. That's who we're looking at. His channel is at Cyber Deconstruction. He's a good friend of mine. I want everyone to support his content. Let's go make his live stream poppin'. He's live right now debating.
Thank you all.
And let's go give him a Doug and Justin raid. Let him know that we're all coming to watch his live stream. I can't see how many people are watching right now because I've got zoomed in. How many people are watching the live stream? I see 15 people watching, although it's going to be delayed. We got to get this number up like well over 50. Let's get at least 50 people in this room. There we go. We're at 24. Let's go find Cyber Deconstruction right now. He's live on YouTube. He's live on TikTok. Let's go give him a raid. I'll see you over in his live stream here in just a few minutes. And so we'll be able to, go and what's the word I'm looking for? Well, we'll go and taunt. We'll go and taunt the opposition. I love it. To me, like watching other people debate's kind of fun. It's like watching a basketball game or a football game where you get to go and like yell at the referees and taunt the other team. That's kind of how I treat it. To me, it's like watching a sporting event. It's a lot of fun. So, guys, let's go all get over to Cyber Deconstruction's live stream on TikTok and on YouTube. And then I'll see you over there in just a minute. And we got actually 2 more super chats came in. Brittany says, Rock Rose Gin with Limonada San Pellegrino Ice. Ooh. I like the sound of this, actually. This sounds like a good recipe. Brittany, are you in our Discord yet? Brittany, get into Discord and message me these recipes because this sounds really good. I might be trying this week. when I'm outside of some work hours doing a little bit of mixology. And the Kern, thank you for the super chat, says, is there any scripture to support modern apostles? Actually, there is. Yeah. I would point you to the pastoral epistles. If you go to the pastoral epistles, there seems in 1 Corinthians chapter 13 and 14, there seems to be this opinion that apostles are going to keep happening. They're going to keep reproducing, and we're going to make more of them. And then also, apostles to me is not really as precise as people think. Like an apostle is just a sent one, a person who's sent on a mission, right? So anybody doing the mission of Jesus technically could call themselves an apostle. It doesn't have an uber precise meaning. So I think it is technically biblical. But that being said, listen, we've got almost 100 people over on Cyber Deconstruction's live stream on YouTube. So I'll see you over there, guys. Thank you so much. Let's go do some chirping in the comments and light them up. Thanks so much for being here, guys. We'll see you again soon.